Good evening, everyone. Please come to order and welcome to the Bel Air Beach special regular work session for January 20th, 2021. Please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Robin Aki. Here. Councilmember Marv Beam.
Here.
Councilmember Dave Gaddis.
Here.
Councilmember Jody Shirley.
Here.
Vice Mayor Glenn Gunn.
Here.
Mayor Joseph Manzo.
Here.
City Manager Lynn Reeves.
Here.
City Attorney Fred Riley.
Here.
And Councilmember Rita Swope was unable to attend.
Okay, thank you. So we have 8 items on the agenda for tonight, along with the general business. First item is to discuss creating a City of Bel Air Beach policy to specifically address remote attendance as well as a quorum, physical presence, for the rapidly changing manner of conducting business electronically. This was brought by Vice Mayor Gunn. And the description says to develop a concept for remote attendance by City Council and the residents in alignment with Florida's government in the Sunshine Law and budgeting, acquisition, and implementation of the necessary equipment. City Attorney Riley to provide case law, which he did today. I just want to mention to everyone in the audience that's attending, this is a work session, so we're going to discuss stuff amongst ourselves here. It's the only time we're able to discuss this. And at some point, I'm going to ask for the citizens' comments. It's not as formal as a regular meeting, but we will have one opportunity for citizens' comments, and that's if the council allows me to do that. Does anyone have any objection to us opening the meeting to citizen comments on these items? There being no objection, we will open it up at some point in time. So I will call for it. You don't have to raise your hand. Then at the time I call for it, then raise your hand and be back. You'll come to this podium here and speak. Okay, Vice Mayor, this was your topic.
At the last meeting, we talked about the possibility of institutionalizing remote attendance, basically institutionalizing the lessons in technology that we learned during the recent shutdowns. Benchmarking shows that these policies aren't really anything new, it just seems like Bel Air Beach is late to the game. Experience showed that we had greater resident attendance when we were using the electronic Zoom format for meeting. And why is it now that we can't capitalize and build on that experience that we had during those electronic meetings? At this point, I think it's probably best to move to the city manager because he's kind of investigated the technology side of this thing, and also the city attorney has done some case.
I would agree. Does anybody mind if we go to the city manager and city attorney next?
No, please.
Okay, so let me turn it over to, I don't care who goes first, but
Well, I'm still doing some investigation, but as you all know, we're going to convert to iPads probably sometime in March, April timeframe. And what I'm looking to do is you will actually be here, but you'll be on a Zoom meeting or something of that nature. So what that does, that allows the public to participate in that meeting. So we're looking into how we can accomplish that. We've been doing some testing with the iPads we have against the computer system. So what it looks like, just as a generic, all of you will have an iPad at your desk. City clerk will have one, I'll have one. Then we will connect something to the overhead projector. So the Zoom meeting will actually be going on, but you'll still be here. And then that gives the opportunity for the residents to call in and speak to you, just like we did when we were sitting at home or in our homes. So Bel Air has done some of that technology already with, they use Surfaces instead of iPads, but we're going to get a little more detail from them. So we did some testing, Kyle and I, and it appears it will work. We just have to get rid of a few bugs that we've got. So that's the direction, and really that's what I was going to talk to you about, the hybrid Zoom meetings in number 5. So that's where we're at right now. Any questions?
I'd like to make a comment on that.
Sure.
In theory, it sounds like a great idea. I'm not 100% sure that it'll work, and the reason why is because each one of these iPads is going to have a listening microphone. They're not in sync. They never will be in sync. There's always a second or two delay from whatever your media is. So let's just say we all used our phones and started a Zoom session. What you would start picking up, first off, if there's anyone here, they have to listen on this microphone. They're not going to be able to hear through the iPad or whatever. Every microphone in this room is going to pick up that voice, and it's going to be over and over and over until they all catch up. I've kind of put some thought into it, and if you wanted to do that, you could, but you could not do the sound. So without sound, let's say that you wanted to get your sound source from one source. So we had this killer microphone that picked up everything in the room. Well, now you've lost control over the video. So you have to use the same video and audio source every time. Kind of the way that I see it is that we do have an all-encompassing microphone for this room, and we have to have one person who's monitoring a camera and literally pointing it at the person. I know that creates an expense, but I've thought about it every way possible, and I cannot think of any other way to do it. Not only that, but then you also have to have someone to steer the Zoom meeting. So most people would think that it would be Patty, but I ran one of those meetings, if you recall, whenever we were having technical difficulties. You can't take notes and run the meeting. You just can't do it. So it's going to be one of those things where we really need two people to have this virtual meeting where it works for everyone. The people outside the building are not a problem. The citizens are not a problem. It's us. Whenever we're in a room together and we're trying to merge it all together into this hybrid virtual meeting, it's the only way possible that I can think of that's going to work efficiently.
Folks, I just want to, one second, Vice Mayor, I just want to see if you have any, since we kind of have two topics together here, and I think if there's no objection here, we can put them both together and deal with it, because this is morphing into number 4, which is discussing the hybrid Zoom meetings for council, boards, and committees. So if you want, we can put this all together. But does anybody have an objection to that? First off, I know Victor is here. He wanted to say some words because he's done this before, but maybe we can deal with this as one thing. But before we get into too long a discussion, I want to keep it with this group here. And I've already read Fred Riley's memo, but in case somebody didn't see it, I want to know the legalities of this and whether we actually can even legally do what we're talking about doing. So, but first off, does anybody have an objection to combining 1 and 4? Combine 1 and 4, and then Mr. Riley, when Mr. Gaddis is finished, if you'll just give us the legalities.
I think I've pretty much shared my thoughts. In fact, I had just a brief offline conversation with Patty, and she agrees as far as who's actually going to control the meeting. It would be impossible for her to run it.
Based on the tone of the discussion when the council last addressed this, to me there were 2 questions that really needed a legal answer for. So that's why I wrote the memo that addressed 2 different questions. The first question is about quorum and being physically present, and based on state statutes and 2 city code provisions, the requirement as it stands now is that you have to have, this council has to have 4 council members present in order to have, physically present in order to have a forum, and that's the standards that you have to meet. The second question was related to can you utilize communications media technology and I've given some analysis of that. The basic concept that I would focus on is that anything that increases the ability of citizens to participate is generally going to be a positive thing. And if you're going to use the technology, I don't see any legal reason why you can't do that. I am aware from talking to Victor and others that it's being done in other municipalities. So the thing that Lynn and I had a couple of conversations about, the thing you have to segregate, in my opinion, are the quorum issue and the media communications technology. Those are two separate things, although they are intertwined in some way. As far as when we last discussed this, I told you I would look into the statutes and to see what case law there was. I really did not find something that I felt that was on point, that would give us a great recent case to point to. And part of the reason I wanted to look at the case law is that, as you'll remember, one of the backup documents was an article that summarized a whole series of Attorney General opinions, and the Attorney General opinions were, to be quite honest, all over the place, and they were also over a period of about 20 years. So the different Attorney Generals have expressed different views, but I'm telling you at this point, based on this city's existing code provisions and Florida law, you do have to have 4 people present, and physically present, for there to be a quorum. And certainly will stand for any questions that you have.
Rick, my question is, and I didn't find it in here, maybe I'm not reading it right. Look, it says on page 6, item number 4, it talks about a majority vote of the quorum present. My question is, what do you do with the folks that are not present? We've had some situations where people have not been present here, for whatever reason, and this is before the governor, or after the governor's dispensation expired, if you will. What do? Do they vote? Are they permitted to vote? Because it talks about having a majority present to vote. We have a stricter rule that requires actually 4 votes to pass any ordinance or resolution. So what do? Do the people who are on the telephone get to vote? Do they not get to vote? Do they get to listen and speak? What do we do with that?
Well, if a city council member is on the phone or on a Zoom conference call and is participating in the meeting remotely, and there are 4 city council members physically present, then they can participate and they can be one of the, they have to vote. Under Florida, there's a different statute that requires you to vote, but the quorum requirement is 4 physically present, and in order to pass an ordinance or a resolution, you have to have a majority of the council vote in favor of it. So indeed, there would need to be 4 people that voted in favor of it, whether they were physically present or they were present remotely.
I guess I'm getting hung up on, go to page 6, item 4, page number 4. It says, a majority of the members of the governing body shall constitute a quorum. We agree. That's 4, okay? And a vote of a majority of a quorum present, even highlighted that, is necessary to enact any ordinance or adopt any resolution, except that 2/3 of the membership is required to enact an emergency ordinance. So, that's it. So it's talking about the majority present, okay? If we have 4 people present and 3 people on the phone, majority doesn't cut it. We need 4 votes. So you would need all 4 of the members present to vote on that, the way I read this order, this statute. I'll put you right after Fred answers this.
I think we need some clarification to why we're here.
Okay?
Because what brought this to a head was we had been operating under the precedence of you can call in, but you must have a quorum present, 4 people. Okay? You can vote. That was the precedent, was if you call in, you cannot be counted as part of the quorum because you must be present, but your vote counts as part of the majority. And that's why I brought this forward, is I just want to institutionalize that precedent before it gets lost or misinterpreted or the interpretation changed further down the road. There was never any consideration to change the presence of the 4 quorum here. Because my takeaway from that article that I handed out was the guy said he advocated having 4 people present to consist of the quorum because if Florida does change that thing, it would invalidate anything that we might have done up until then. So I am still in favor. 4 people constitute a quorum. That quorum must be present. If only the quorum is there, the majority of the quorum can enact a vote. But if you have other people who are participating in the meeting online, my interpretation, and the interpretation has been, via that precedent that I'm raising before this council right now, was their votes count towards the majority.
I agree.
That's how we've always done it, I mean,
Yes.
since I've,
I think all of us, most of us have been out at least once and we've voted before.
But I know what we've done, whether it was right or wrong. I'm not saying anyone did anything intentional. Mark, I'm coming to you next. This statute that Fred just gave us here talks about a majority of the quorum present. You need 4, that's not our rule. Our rule is you must have 4 votes to pass any ordinance, okay? If we only have 4 people, let's say 3 of us were all sick, we only have 4 people here, something comes on, it's 3 to 1, that does not pass, that fails, okay? We were deadlocked one time, 3 to 3, that would fail, okay? We had to call you, you were out that time, and we had to call you and say, we need to break this deadlock, because the city manager, I remember, had to get something to the tax office like the next day. We need 4, so I'm just trying to straighten this out. I'm not challenging it, I'm just trying to challenge it in light of what this statute says, because it's talking about a majority of the quorum present, which means 3 to 1. 3 to 1 doesn't pass it for us. You need 4, and then somebody else would have to be able to vote, and bring it in with 4. If you have 4 people on the line, I'm confused at this point, because our other rules say you need 4 to pass. I'll go back to you, Fred, and then Mark Bean, and then back to council.
The way I would analyze it is what a 2-step function. What do you need in order to have a quorum? And I think it's very clear you need 4 council members present and physically present in order to have a quorum. Once a quorum has been established, then you need 4 votes of the 7 city council members in order to pass a ordinance or resolution. So, I mean, I understand where you're coming from with the angle, and angle's not meant in a negative way. I understand the interpretation that you're trying to clarify, but my feeling is first establish the quorum, and if you don't have 4 people present, then you can't pass anything anyway. A lot of the stuff I looked at and a lot of the Attorney General opinions address this is that the allowing somebody to call in is normally done when there's exigent circumstances such as an illness or somebody's traveling for their job or something like that. It's typically not applied when somebody wants to stay home and kind of watch or participate, but also watch the baseball game. That's not really what the tone of anything that I've looked at all. There's exigent circumstances, and you're accommodating a council member when they have exigent circumstances and need to participate remotely.
But that's different than I think if it's exigent circumstances, yes, but we don't require any explanation from a council member. We have a council member tonight that's out. I think it might be health related, that's what I heard last time, Lynn is nodding. That would be exigent circumstances to me, but, like you say, if you're home watching the baseball game, that's really not an exigent circumstance. We're not gonna say, why were you not here? So how do we know that? I mean, we happen to know it tonight because that information was volunteered, but we normally don't know why you're out.
Well, I'll give you the example of one end of the spectrum that I know the outcome of. If all 7 of you are here, physically present, and all 7 of you vote, which is what you're required to do, then if 4 of you pass something, then 4 or more, then it's adopted. If you don't get to 4, it is simply not adopted. So that's the best case scenario, and all the stuff I've looked at under Florida law is oriented towards there being people physically present for sunshine meetings.
Is it your recommendation that if we're going to review this ordinance, that there be something about the acceptable reasons? I mean, there's many reasons people can be out. Vacation, extended trips, sickness, surgery. I mean, we go on and on and on. Some of those are better than others. So are you?
Well, my
Yes.
question, and I'm just asking, it's not a rhetorical question, I think it's a very meaningful question, is in the last couple of years, has this been a significant problem? And if it has not been a significant problem, then do you really need to do something to address it? And I know in talking to Vice Mayor Gunn on several occasions, his thought process, and I think rightfully so, is oriented towards what can you do from a technology standpoint, and how can we fashion policy that will take into account the potential advances in technology. This last year, the city council lived through using the technology in order to hold its meetings. The one thing that was different, though, is that the governor issued a series of executive orders that simply made it substantially easier for the city to have flexibility in doing these kind of meetings. So my recommendation is, I really don't think you need a policy, in my opinion, but if you all decide that you do, I'm certainly ready, willing, and able to help you draft the policy.
Mark?
Fred just addressed exactly what I wanted to talk about. Perhaps the absences, in other words, you have 2 members of the council that decided, well, I'm going to be on my boat every time there's a council meeting, or be in my pool and have the laptop by the edge of the pool. And he just addressed that. Right now, we don't have an issue, but it's something that we could do if it's necessary.
And we just passed new rules in our charter just for that. So let's just say I decided to go voting 2 or 3 meetings in a row. Well, technically, you guys can boot me out.
Not if you phone it in, though.
What's that?
Not if you phone it in. If you just go off, then that's your problem. But if you, as long as you phone it.
This is there's several things that you have to take into account. Number one, the way that we wrote the charter, I don't think it addressed remote meetings. It was, you had to be here. Number two, we have to have a quorum. We have to have a minimum of 4 people here to have a meeting. And then number 3, if you happen to not be able to be here, but you're able to phone in or Zoom in or whatever, then you have to vote. I don't really see where there's much of a problem, because if we keep doing that over and over and over, eventually the council will step up and say enough is enough. So I think the problem would kind of take care of itself if we had an abusive case. And as far as voting goes, as long as we don't interpret it where you have to be part of the present quorum to be a valid vote in we're going, I think we're fine.
I think we need a definition of present, because if you're present on the phone, you're present, right? So I don't know that we're splitting hairs there, but I completely agree with what you're saying, and I made a note before Fred said it is, we're discussing this as if it's a problem, and there's not a problem. There is not an issue, and never has been an issue. There was a time when we had someone very ill who passed away that was on council. That probably went a little long before they appointed someone new, but, this just is not an issue, the attendance situation, and I don't see a problem with calling in or Zooming in. If you Zoom in, clearly you're present. You're sitting in front of your computer, you've got your camera on, your microphone on, it's very clear that you're present. I just don't, I don't see it an issue at all. Present is.
None of you would remember this, but we had a council member when I was on council in 04, 06, never made a budget meeting. And that's an issue, and that's one thing we try to prevent. But the thing we haven't addressed is abuse of the system. And right now, we don't have a problem, but I think it was something to put on the back burner. If that happens, we'll have to address it.
And then if you remember, Marv, back then those budget meetings were at 3 in the afternoon or something, and, you know, we finally got them so that people that work can actually be on council and attend meetings. There were so many meetings that were daytime, it was impossible
A lot of
to
them
attend.
were that were earlier in the day, you know, starting at 5 o'clock. You know, that was an issue. But, you know, this was a long time ago. But we don't want history to repeat itself here.
The charter amendment, you know, if we go back and think about the intent for that charter amendment, attendance, it was under the old paradigm. Attendance was you were there at the meeting, right? It didn't reflect the new paradigm of, hey, I can call in on a Zoom meeting, I can still participate, I can engage on this thing, and I can take part in the critical discussion or debate and vote. So the original intent for that charter amendment was to address people not showing up at work sessions or even participating or making an attempt to participate and engage in those things, and then coming to a council meeting and voting on something that they had no background on or weren't adequately prepared to engage on. So that was the original intent on this thing. So if you think about this in light of how business is done today, if you can call in and stay engaged and participate, again, what's the issue here? I mean, do we need to, I think we're all adults here. Everybody came to this job. We're not getting paid for this thing. We're dedicating a lot of time, a lot of resources to this thing because we're all adults here and we're here to serve and do the best job we can. I have confidence that nobody's here to game this thing. I think that whatever the cause, you can still participate, you can still engage, and if that becomes an issue, then you need to address that issue. But other than that, I don't think we're at the point where you need to bring a note from mom, or you need to bring a note from your doctor, or whatever, to say you can't. So along the same lines is, I'm trying to fix something that's not really broken at this point. I think I'm trying to harness this technology thing for the betterment of our residents and the city business. But I mean, there are some other aspects of this thing. Maybe just a red herring, not worthy of a distraction.
I agree with what you said. I mean, I think I was one of the people who pushed this through. I witnessed it before I was on council, and not to mention the person's name, but missed every single work session. And yet, when the vote came up that night, vote to pass the item that was discussed at like 6 work sessions, to me, I was just like cringing. I was like, how could you possibly do that? You haven't participated in any of this. But he had to vote because he was on council, so it just was wrong. And that takes care of people who just get elected and just don't show up. We've not had that problem. I agree with you. I would hope that no one tries to game it. I think if someone does, then we're going to have to come up with a policy because it's just not, I'll come right back to you, Fred, just not fair to the 4 people who are here. I mean, hey, I'd like to be I don't have a pool, but I'd like to be at poolside or, be home in my slippers and not have to get dressed up and, ready and shaved and everything else and come down here. It's a lot easier to do it from home if you want to. Once in a while, yeah. But I mean, if somebody takes, 6 or 8 meetings, I mean, come on. That to me, I think is play. And for whatever reason, I'd be more inclined if they were sick to say, hey, listen, I'm sick, I can't get in. That's fine. But, if they're playing tennis, then they're not sick. So, Fred, I don't know that we have to do anything right now, but why? So, go ahead, Fred.
I just want to, several of you have mentioned something that made me look back at what you passed related to the forfeiture of office. it includes the language, or at the council's discretion, fails to attend any 4 council meetings, budget sessions, or work sessions during a rolling 12-month period during the term of office, with the exception of special or emergency meetings. So the point is, the at council's discretions gives you some flexibility if someone's, going to the Rays game 4 months in a row, and they call in from center field, and, they're obviously not taking their commitment to being a city council member seriously, then, it's obvious they're at the Rays game, because you just heard the PA announcer, then you have a basis to look at what their performance has been, and basically say, as a council, we're not going to give you a excuse absence, and, we now are going to move forward with forfeiture of office because you missed 4 meetings in a row. So to me, that's a good safety valve, because it gives the council as a whole some level of discretion if there's ever a situation where there is something that is akin to abuse.
So if I summarize, Robin, we haven't heard from you. Have anything you want to add?
To me, this just seems like not a problem, that we don't need to really address this now until it becomes a problem. So, I mean, I feel like we've been talking about it for 31 minutes without really trying to fix a problem, because there is no problem. So I think, like Lynn said, we're all adults. We show up when we need to. When we don't, we make every effort to do Zoom or phone calls. Sometimes the audio is not the best, but that's the price you pay when you call in, so you just have to expect that. And I'd say just let's keep going until the problem develops, and we'll see how it goes after that.
So to summarize what we've all discussed, and I think we're all in agreement on, quorum constitutes 4 people present. That's what our rules and our laws say, so you need 4 people still present. If we have the 4 council members present, we can have, the other 3 members can phone it in, Zoom it in, whatever technology we have instituted here to get it into the meeting. You'll have full voting rights and full participation rights on that. We will not put any policies in place right now to whether how many times you can do that. We'll let people be adults. I agree with that. That's what everybody has pretty much said. If it becomes abusive, if somebody's phoning it in from Tahiti for 6 months in a row, we're going to have to deal with that then. And we'll deal with that as a council when that comes up at this point in time. I think that takes care of everything. I don't know that we have to change anything that we have right now. Is there anything that requires a legal change? Because I want to go into the second part of this, which is the technology aspect of it.
No, to the first part, there's nothing further.
Okay. So are we all in consensus on that? Okay. Now, the next part is the technology. Dave started to talk a little bit about the echo, and I've experienced that myself. You get the echo, you can hear everything going. So let's get back to the technology. And at some point, I want to hear from Victor, because he's done this already for Indian Rocks.
I just wanted to mention, there's obviously a design spiral here, the learning curve, and I'm wondering if there's some trial and error, trying some things. One thing I saw about the Zoom meeting that I thought was actually kind of a positive was it kind of knocked down a lot of the sidebar discussions or people punching in, because there was a moderator basically controlling the discussion there. So is it possible that everybody's mic is muted? And one of the things that we addressed was there has to be training on this thing, there has to be a staffing, because from the outset, I've always believed that, no, Patty shouldn't be saddled with this responsibility, it's too much. If you were to go to something like a Zoom format, because it's immediately recorded and can be uploaded, for the next morning, really, our existing video guy can become something like a moderator, and that becomes his new job role and all this sort of thing. So, there's kind of a conceptualization of how this thing's going to work, and then maybe can we make some easy stuff, off-the-shelf stuff? Can we make it work? If not, then we need to get really clean.
I would like to hear what Victor has to say.
I do,
like
I
his
do.
suggestions, and let's see where it goes.
Victor, you ready? So for anyone who doesn't know, Victor's our AV specialist. He's the one who records all of our meetings. And he's already done something similar, and he can tell us what he's done and what the technology's at. Go ahead, Victor.
Hi, Council, how are you? So as Vice Mayor Gunn was saying, there is a lot of trial and error with it, and there's no easy system. But because I've done it before, I've experienced a lot of the issues and whatnot, and I can implement that to figure out how to do it seamlessly. And the problems are with the Zoom meeting, you have to have a strong moderator and have strong settings, because you don't want somebody joining the meeting in their underwear or start screaming profanities. So you have to have a setting where they join muted, and they don't have video access, only the council members. So it can be moderated properly, but it has to be done carefully. There's always the flukes of hacking, which we can't get around anyways, but you have to do your best. And I can help with that. It might be, eventually I can probably serve both roles once the trial and error period is over, but I probably have to have somebody helping me. I can have someone from my team to do the Zoom part of it while I'm doing the video part of it. Because the video is a little bit complicated. I have about $20,000 to $30,000 of equipment, of robotic cameras that are controlled by a computer. So usually I have 4 cameras. They're all 4K, high definition. It looks great. What I usually bring out to Indian Rocks is only 2 cameras, because that's all you need. It looks very good. We don't have any. It's a professional production, because I'm editing while filming it. Basically got the preview window and then the live shot window. So it looks, I don't know if any of you had a chance to look at the link that I sent out. I would also invite you to check out the meeting, but unfortunately their next meeting is the second Tuesday of next month, so it's a bit out. But as far as the trial and error, maybe I was just thinking, listening into all your thoughts and opinions, I wouldn't be opposed to, it's about 2 hours of my time to set up all this equipment. It's a lot of wires and a lot of stuff that I have to make sure that's run correctly so that it's not in anybody's way, so that it looks good. But I would not be opposed to offering you guys to maybe do a trial run. So maybe we could have a quick meeting for about 5 minutes. I could set everything up. And then just to see how you guys like it. Maybe you can have your family watch it from home and then see, and maybe you can have some participants, and then they'll be on the Zoom part of it as well, and then we can mix and mesh. And then if you guys like it, then why not go ahead? But that's an offer. You guys are such good customers of mine for many, many years that I'd be willing to offer that at no cost just to see if you guys like it. So. As far as audio goes, Councilmember Gaddis, I agree with you, it's difficult to mix and mesh. The ideal situation is if I can tap into the soundboard, and then I've got straight feed, I don't have background noises or anything. Sometimes you run into the issue, at Indian Rocks, they don't have an input for me, so I have a very good noise canceling microphone that I set up right on their microphone, and I get great audio. I don't know if any of you saw the video, but it works well. It's not perfect, but I figure out the problems and how to go around it. So I've got a great microphone, or I can get a mixer and do my own audio line in. So a lot of the stuff that you guys are worried about with sound problems, with video problems, I can help with that. It's just you have to tell me what you want as the client, and then me as the professional, I can make it work. And like I said, I have no problems with demonstrating that. So that's my spiel, I guess. I don't know if you guys have any questions for me or.
First, let me just say thank you for the free offer and
Yes.
for to council what you want to do.
I don't have a problem with that. I would not want to try this out at an official meeting. I would just like to have a dry run where it's just us. We've got a few people out in internet land, and we see how it goes. Now, do you have some sort of a screen, or do we have a screen now that we can use just to see what's coming in from the outside? Because you also, to test this properly, a couple of us are going to have to be at home, so that we can prove it out in all, the hybrid, the full hybrid. So a couple people home, the group here, that's another user, and then we've got the call-ins and the listeners.
I'm not sure what technology you guys would have, but I don't think it would be very difficult to plug into the projector and then have whatever the Zoom view is. That's what we do at Indian Rocks. They have their own projector. It's a little bit different because they have it behind the council, so you can see, and it's easier for me because then I get a shot of that behind the people. But they also have like screens turned around towards them so they can see. But I'm sure we can figure out, I can come up with some logistics to give you guys a view of the Zoom attendees as well.
Yeah, just one screen that we can kind of all see. It doesn't have to be anything massive, but just to prove, a proof of concept.
Anything can be done, and there might be one or two little bugs, but I can work it out always, and especially if we do a test run, so. But I think it should be seamless, and I really do believe, like I said, it's about 2 hours of my time to set everything up, and then probably just as much time to tear everything down. So I wouldn't offer that at no charge if I didn't believe in it. I really think that you guys would love it, so that's why I'm saying that it's a good option.
So are you proposing that you would do the live feed like you do at Indian Rocks and simultaneously do a Zoom meeting?
Yes, I can. It depends on what you guys want. If you guys want to have your own staff do that, that's possible. But I would recommend having someone on my team do it. I probably won't do both at first, maybe eventually when I get the flow of it. But it is a lot of work, as Mr. Gaddis was saying, to make sure everything flows smoothly. So I would recommend having anyone that knows how to set up the meeting properly and how to manage it so that you don't have yahoos entering the chat.
Right, so I wonder if, just kind of taking a step back, right now we don't have a live feed at all. So I think maybe offering live feed to the public is helpful, but maybe limiting a Zoom call to if a council member's on. Because that's a big problem, is we don't have good communication if someone has to be out. So it's very difficult to hear on the phone with the microphone next to it, both on both ends. So if we could, like maybe take one problem at a time, right? Let's do the live feed. Let's look at doing the live feed. Maybe I'm speaking out of turn, and let's look at maybe just having Zoom available for staff and council members initially. I don't know that. I mean, that could get crazy having public calling in on a Zoom meeting. Maybe I'm wrong, but.
Yeah, it's never foolproof. I think that's a good suggestion to start off, because you can vet people and you can try, but once you let them start speaking and maybe you let a video, I think Indian Rocks we don't even let video, we just let audio, but then you still don't know if they're going to start talking normally and then all of a sudden slip something in there and then we have to mute them quickly, So it would be, I think, much better if you just let staff in there. But that's up to you guys. I just make stuff happen. You guys make the rules.
Victor, we had, almost 6 months of this, and I can't recall a single problem that we had with anybody violating protocol in terms of, actually, people would agree with the vice mayor. It actually worked very orderly. Somebody's going to have to be by the mute button because you never know that anyone can dial in at any point in time. But I thought the whole purpose of why we're doing this was to get the public kind of be able to come in remotely. So I'm in favor if that's the reason. If this is all being done just to set up for council members, I'm not as in favor of it at that point. I will mention one other thing. I've said this before. It wasn't in Indian Rocks, one of your meetings. It was the Indian Rocks Big C. I don't think you do that one, right? But at that last Big C meeting, we had hybrid. I was at home trying to listen in. I was straining to hear them. I think they use the same kind of equipment we do, and unless you're talking like this, so if you go like that, you can't hear the person. And so the hybrid was very, very difficult for the people who were out on the other side. And I just want to put that point on the record. Maybe we need to replace this microphone system. There are better mics that can pick up, almost spot pick up your voice, because these you have to speak into, and people just have a natural tendency. If I'm going to speak to Jody Shirley, I'm going to turn like this. That's just nature. And as soon as I do that, no one's hearing me. Maybe she'll hear me, but no one else will. So that's an issue.
And that stems from the production value. So you guys have a pretty decent mixer here. It's all digital, so it's not perfect. Everything's run through a computer. But ideally, if you guys had someone monitoring the levels, if someone's speaking over here to the left, you can boost that microphone up live if someone's watching that, because they should see the levels that are going up and down, and that can be addressed I don't know if your system's set up for that or if you would need an upgrade, but there's ways around that. Everything can be fixed. It's just how much you guys are bothered by it and what you want to do about it. But that's the easiest is just to get people to talk into the microphone, you know. But the masks don't help because you can't hear through them, and even you can't see the mouth movements. So it's difficult times that we're dealing with now. But I know you guys are doing the best you can to make do, and I'm trying to help. So
So,
The microphones have been a problem
yeah.
since day one. It's old technology, we could do better. I say we shop around for mic upgrades because it has always been a problem. Even where you're standing right now, you're projecting your voice, you're doing a pretty good job. I don't really hear you through the PA because you've got to be right here.
right on it, yeah.
And if we solve that, that's part of the road to fixing this. And so maybe that's where we start, and then once we've got good microphones, then he can come here and plug in, and let's try some things.
We're not clear. Citizens, anybody want to say anything? No citizen comments? Come back to council here. We have.
The Zoom meetings worked really well for us. I was really pleased with that, and I think everybody kind of started hitting the stride there, and I thought they were very productive meetings. So, I mean, it was a very simple system to work. I mean, there was a little bit of a learning curve there, you know, my mic's muted or whatever. I mean, coming up with a protocol, maybe we start with something simplistic and work on the way up, rather than try to fit our meetings to the hardware and technology that we have. Start with something simple that we all have a familiarity with and can work, and try to start from there and build on top of that. So, just want to say that.
I think in the comments that I got from the outside was the Zoom meetings where people were able to hear, because there's people who only watch these things on tape or, you know, remotely. And they said the difference is because everybody, you know, again, here, I'm doing it right now, and I'm pretty good with this. I'm talking to you, and I'm talking outside the mic. They said everybody spoke to their mic because your computer was right in front of you. So the audio was much easier to hear if you were remote. So if we can overcome that, either through, I'm with Dave. I mean, this was great 15 years ago or whatever. There's better. So it's not that expensive to replace 10 microphones. Let's get the proper ones and give people a little bit of latitude, because I'm sorry, people are going to turn their head to face the person they're talking to. I've told people speaking to the mic 100 times, and they get into the topic and they forget. They're not doing it intentionally. So, and you can help us maybe in that regard. Tell us what the right microphones are to get. And
Definitely, I do it for my own equipment all the time, so I'm always upgrading. Like I said, I've got a very good universal microphone that probably wouldn't do great for like such a big room, but if you got a couple of those, you wouldn't have to, then you'd have to figure out feedback issues and whatnot. But there's much better technology that's digital now. I think these are still XLR analog microphones, so it's definitely upgradable.
just so I'm straight, we're talking about this only right now for council, right? We're not, because this is going to cost extra, obviously, and we're not talking about doing this for all the other meetings that we do here at the city, right? Not now. I mean, maybe someday.
It could be.
Right.
I mean, once it's up and running, I mean, how big a leap is to just turn the system on and that's how you do business, unless you're paying a moderator for that kind of stuff. You know, and I think Dave may have a point there. Maybe at some point, and I mean, the technology is there where everybody wears their little microphone, little boom mic in front of their mouth, and or you clip it on and get rid of these things, and no matter how you turn or your head, it's on your ear and you're talking into your little boom mic. I mean, technology's there.
Where do we go from here, folks? I mean, we can't vote tonight, but we can at least get this on the next, move this thing forward. Victor, you can start getting a plan in place if that's what we all want you to do. But we can't give you official authorization tonight. This is a work session. We're just able to discuss it, but we can kind of come to a consensus if we're all in agreement. So are we all in agreement?
Mayor, I still think we need to look at both technologies. I understand Victor's, but I also think since we are going to spend the money for iPads, I think that there is another possibility that we can do this and connect it together. And I agree with you, Dave, Patty can't do it. It's going to take two people regardless of what we do. And even Indian Rocks uses 2 people, my understanding. So, I think what we need to do is kind of get Victor to put something together on paper that we can look at, and then go back and do the same thing with this other possibility, and just come back to you and take baby steps. I don't want to go out and spend a bunch of money for something that doesn't finish, I guess is where I'm at. And I think the Zoom meetings, for the most part, you had a lot larger participation when you had that opportunity. And if there's a way to get rid of that feedback, we had it when we had a phone in the room, when we did this test the last couple days, Kyle and I, but we did not have it when the phone was going. So the little bit of feedback that you're talking about, Dave. So that there again, we've just got to figure out what the problem is and clean it up. And you're right, these mics are 10 years, right, Patty? 10 years old?
Approximately, yes.
Yeah, I mean, some of them have been replaced, but they're 10 years old. So it's not current technology, that's for sure.
And it's not the rest of our system. I've seen these same microphones in other facilities, and they're just as poor. I mean, it's not that they're poor, they were good at the time, they're just, it's not what we expect now. Like what Glenn just said, I mean, you could put a little clip mic, and that's the way they do TV interviews. You have a little tiny thing that looks like a button. It's not.
We give you all a camera and you just face it at yourself. Selfies.
And then people turn away. Okay, so do we want, Victor can you get work on yours this month? Can you work on yours, Lynn? Can we get back on this in next month for a work session? Because we can't deal with this at a regular meeting.
Maybe by the middle of the month, yeah.
Okay. Victor?
Middle of next month, or?
Yeah, middle of
Yeah,
next
sure,
month.
sure.
We all good with that, as a council? Okay.
The only question I have is budget. We have to have something to work with.
And that's part of getting, how do I say, the components together to figure out what that's going to cost us. And we don't have the components at this point. We don't have that, maybe I don't know if we do, Victor, or not, because we cleaned that room out with the old stuff. We may have to go buy something that you can plug into or whatever, so we need to get that cost together before you go spend thousands of dollars on it.
Lynn, Victor mentioned to me about the COVID grants. Is that exhausted at this point? Do we have any more options under that, the COVID grants?
And I will talk to Greg to find out what they did, because we got a law enforcement grant for our COVID stuff. So we were not eligible to go to the county for the same stuff, because we didn't spend over that grant. It was a $25,000 grant, and we haven't exhausted all that money. So you can't do a duplicate grant. You can't collect twice, I guess is what I'm saying. So it may be that we can take some of this law enforcement grant and we've got to buy some stuff and purchase it. Because we are doing it for, it's out to bid right now, the video cameras for the doors. That's something that we're using with that COVID grant that we got from law enforcement.
So you can look into that and get back to us? All right, thank you. Council, does anybody else have anything? I think that takes care of 2 items. Victor?
I had
Yes.
one more thing maybe to add. Maybe if you guys can come up with a figure that you'd like to see also, because I can make it like a $5 cost, but if you guys don't even have $5 to spend on it, it's not, we're not winning. But if you guys say, hey, we've got this grant and we expect to, I can come up with my own figures, but also I want to make it work for you guys that it's beneficial as well. So if you guys give me some guidelines, that'll help me as well. But if not, I can definitely work on a proposal.
This is something that's not in our budget for this year.
Yeah,
No one envisioned this, this kind of thing. But it's not something that couldn't be in next year's budget, and so, in fact, I just see that they gave us our schedule, so it means we're starting to think about it already. This could easily be in there next time, and this isn't gonna be implemented tomorrow, I don't think, but some things can. I mean, like the last mayor was saying, we have Zoom running well, so if we can get a camera on the roof here, it's an option. And I mean, I wouldn't advertise it to the public as it's a fully functional Zoom thing. It's like, hey, it's in trial. If you must hear that meeting that night that we're first testing it, best come to City Hall that night. You know, it may have some hiccups, we don't want to be responsible if it blinks the first night, but, you know, by the end, we had some issues in the beginning, but by the end, Zoom was running great. It's a shame you weren't allowed to continue it. Anyone else?
I'm just gonna say with relation to the budget, I don't know that any of us have the expertise to even guess at a number, right? So you're gonna have to just take inventory and give us some numbers so we can budget it.
Sure, definitely, yeah.
Well, we required, once we have a proposal, are we required to put it out to bid?
And on the price.
Depends on the price.
Depends on the price.
Yes?
Right now, yes, right now, we can do up to, I think it's $10,000. And that's some things that we're even talking about in the code review. Because those numbers were from 20+ years ago. It's a little different world now.
You buy a lot of audio equipment. I mean, it's all over the place. It's sometimes at auctions, if you know what you're looking for, you can buy it, so
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
it's
I was
out
gonna
there.
say per meeting, you're never even gonna come close to that anyways, so it's not anywhere. So,
I've got a question for Dave. Of what if the feedback problem is an issue in your mind, and if everybody used an iPad and plugged in a headset and used that, I mean, it would look weird at first, but, you know, there's people who work in big offices with cubes and stuff on the phone, you know, they're on headsets anyway, and people fly airplanes, and the person sitting right next to you, you're talking to them on a headset because it's easier and you can hear better. I mean,
Right, it's just that whatever we get, we have to make sure that, number one, our speakers aren't doing anything, and number two, her microphone doesn't hear me at all. So, yeah, it would have to be real close, a lapel type, collar, whatever, and it may work. But the problem goes back to, now you've got video, you've got the video also, so basically, I guess we would all just have them right in front of us with our plug-in things, and it would just be like we weren't here. The last part of that is, if you're talking through that, your sound is now going to come out of the audio system here, and it will be a delay. So that does create a little bit of a problem because it's annoying. Other than that, yeah, it might work.
But the only people who'd really be listening to that screen are the audience. We'd be listening to each other on the headset and the iPad.
Theoretically.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a trial and error kind of thing. You're gonna try a couple things, see if it works, if it doesn't, let's move on and try something else. KISS principle.
Good with that.
All right, we're all good? Taking care of 2 items. Thank you, Victor.
perfect, thank you, Mayor, thank you, Vice Mayor, Council, thank you.
All right, so everybody's good, 7 o'clock? 7 o'clock. Moving forward, item 2, discuss methods to mitigate costs of damage to city roadways and curbs by contractors working in the city. This is proposed by Vice Mayor Gunn and Councilmember Shirley, and the issue is possible impact fees, builder bonds, etc. I'll open it up to Jody Shirley and Glenn Gunn.
I'll defer to Jody, she's got a lot more experience in these impact fees and bonds and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I did some searches, some local municipalities, and impact fees are very vague. Don't really know what our local cities do. I did find in the city of Bonita Springs, they charge an impact fee. They call it road impact fee. They have a transportation impact fee too, which is a separate item. But this is strictly for road repair and maintenance. For a single-family residence, new construction, they charge $12,350 in impact fees. I'm just giving some background here. Not suggesting that we charge that sort of fee, but that's what they do. When we talk about bonding something, typically you're bonding a repair that you know already needs to be done. So that's a tough one, because you can't really have like a performance bond. I don't know how we look at a bond. I think it would have to be an impact fee of some sort. talked to Lynn, and we currently do not charge impact fees. We do need to hire someone to help us with, planning and zoning board has some things coming up, and the person that would help with the work that needs to be done there could possibly give us some guidance as well. But I'm not going to say that every house that's built, there's damage done, but there's a lot of wear and tear on roads. There's a lot of wear and tear on gutter systems. And it's something to consider when you see, loads of block, loads of concrete coming constantly, especially over 22nd Street Bridge, Harrison Avenue Bridge, the smaller bridges. I don't think that they're engineered to accommodate that load. And it would be nice to have a fund to help with some of those repairs.
It might be something as they pass through to the larger commercial traffic in here, the garbage disposal, whatever big trucks are coming through here, hauling stuff. The bridge repairs are an issue for us, and we don't typically have a lot of control over these. Just the resurfacing going on down there on 22nd stuff. I imagine some of that equipment is kind of pushing the limits of that stuff. No, I don't know.
No, it's, the weight limit is fine going across the bridge. The issue we'll have, as an example, Johnny's having something delivered to his house. Well, we don't have a person on every street to know that that person did some damage to the road. Mainly where we see a lot of the damage is if we have some, and it hasn't been a big problem, is where we've got new construction. And usually when you talk to the contractor about it, because they're signing a form that says they'll repair them, any damage they do, they're signing our right-of-way permit, they're signing their permit application, that they're responsible for. But as far as trying to catch, we'll say a truck as big as a garbage truck going down the street, if somebody did some damage to something, we aren't going to know that. Because you are typically going to have a person that sees them do it.
Yeah, I'm not talking about specific instances of damage as much as, these guys are going through every street here twice a week, and it's a large vehicle with tandem wheels on it, and as those guys turn corners, there's a lot more friction on a tandem rig than whatever, and it's kind of like coming up with some assumptions, this size weight truck going down the street twice a week is going to cause accelerated wear and tear on the asphalt. And it's kind of a leap of faith and an engineering assumption there that this damage is occurring, and we're not going to point to any specific example unless we just happen to see it, but we come up with some sort of impact fee, charge them up front or take it out of whatever service charges they have, and it's just kind of doing some smart engineering math, and an engineer could probably sit down and figure out, or some smart highway engineer. Those guys deal with that stuff all the time. Could probably say, yeah, there's accelerated wear and tear, and this is how we factor it into the budget. And that kind of stuff.
But I don't think you're going to find many, if any, cities that charge a fee for a truck to drive down their street. I just don't.
It seems to me that the impact fee, the only way you could actually charge an impact fee would be a fee tacked on top of permitted work. That would be the only way possible to track what was going on. And then the city engineer would have to look at every job that was getting permitted anyway and could come up with some sort of an assessment that's tacked on to the cost of the permit.
Right, that's really what an impact fee is. Development, it's a little different because they're talking about, big developments, and I know Jody's totally familiar with that. I did do some research too, and, as an example, and we're talking Orlando, but in Orange County, if it's a new construction house, They charge a transportation impact fee, and it varies based on the square footage of the house, but as an example, it's $3,761. That's what they're charging. A couple hundred more if it's outside of, I guess, somewhere outside of the main urban area. But our issue, and I think we do need to do that with the planner, is we're going to retain a planner here very shortly to start with the comp plan. Have that discussion with them because they're very familiar with how the impact fee system works. I understand it to the point that, as an example, mainly developments, it's not typically, in a lot of places, it's not single-family homes, it's a bunch of homes or a bunch of condos, and they pay an impact fee based on the acreage, or they give you land or something for it. And there are credits, but I think that what Jody's saying about the bond, I think you're kind of restricted with that bond, because those bond companies are going to come out and look, and you could end up in what do you want to call it, a legal dispute of some type. This isn't mine, this is yours, it wasn't caused by this person or that person. So I think if you're going to get a fee, you need to get it when you're permitted.
And can I add that I don't think necessarily only new construction, because I think I've shared this with you. Somewhere along the line, I've got a huge chunk out of my valley gutter, and I believe it was the dock guy. I have no way of knowing for sure, but I think it was the dock guy dropped a piece of equipment on it or something. And so, I think any permit issue, maybe there should be a fee. I don't know what that looks like, but that's maybe where the planner can give us a fee schedule for things like that. Because if they have heavy equipment in there, chances are they're going to break some of it, so.
That's the quick and simple solution. This thing is tied to a permit and specific jobs, right?
Right.
Would Chris Rowe have any insight into something like this?
I can ask him. I don't know that he
He's a
would
stormwater
or
field,
wouldn't.
he's got some insight.
He did the underground and stuff, but I could ask that question.
But I think it would be tied to our comp plan, like you said, and I was looking through our code, I think we did have some provisions for impact fees, we just don't have any.
Right. And in that section of the code, a person could say development, okay, a development. Well, is a development one house or is it a development? It's how the word is used. So, and we don't really have, we don't have any developments. We have, unless they tore down a condo and rebuilt it, we have a single family house that's being built, typically. So I think that's how we've got to tie it to the permit system. And can you do what Councilmember Shirley said? Could you do it for other permits? That may be possible.
I would think it would be any permit, and it's based upon basically we have a fee structure, and it's also based upon the size of the job. So a little dock may not cost as much as a big dock. If you're looking at the amount of weight, the number of piles that are brought in and things like that, it would be a calculation system that's not going to be very easy to come up with, and it would take some time to perfect it, I'm sure.
Yeah, it's like I mentioned here over in the Orlando area, if a house is less than 1,200 square feet, they're paying $3,700. Okay, more it's a little elevated, but this one doesn't talk about any docks or anything. So that's a question I think we need to ask. A planner would know all that typically. With
Absolutely, yeah.
impact fees and stuff.
I think, to the Vice Mayor's point, I would not want to see us putting fees on garbage trucks, because you know where that's going to wind up? Right back on that water bill, as, they're not going to pay that, they're just going to pay it and bill us. I do like the idea of some type of fee when you start the construction, but to tie it to all permits, if I replace my front door and I buy it at Home Depot, the impact to your road is zero. I've already paid registration fees and taxes for the city. I don't think there should be any impact fee on small projects. You know, when you start to bring in the heavy artillery, you're doing an addition, you're putting in, you know, bigger things, that's when they should start kicking in. But you do something simple, I mean, that you need a permit for, you know, you change a water tank out, I mean, there's no impact. I mean, that's just another opportunity to get money out of people, and I don't like that part of it. I do like the idea of protecting our streets, though.
Yeah, Mayor, impact fees aren't for that.
Right.
Now, if you want to pay an impact fee to change your door, I'll be glad.
No, I don't. But I mean, and I think also if we're going to do this, Lynn, you and I worked with the, and you know, again, it was, we were happy to get help during the hurricane, but those guys tore the hell out of our roads. They ripped up 2 or 3 roads, and you were aware of it. I think you got some recovery. They're finally getting it fixed now, but there's a brand new paved job on my street, and these guys used a backhoe, bucket loader with the teeth, and they were just digging up the asphalt as they were digging up the leaves. So they should be paying for that kind of stuff too. I mean, in some cases, we can get damages from people. I agree with Jody. I see a piece missing out of my valley curb. Yeah, you did it. No, I didn't. And now you're in the litigation because no one's going to, unless you have witnesses, you're not going to get it from them. So I think if you're building a house, it's almost inevitable you're going to do some damage to the road. So put a little charge on that. If you're putting up a fence, not really.
Well, there's some sliding scale on the permits. Is there earth moving equipment involved? I mean, are there materials over 20,000 pounds involved? Are there concrete trucks coming in? I mean, it's a spectrum, you know. And there's a questionnaire that would be attached to the permit, okay? You're having materials delivered, what is it, how much are you having earth moving equipment brought in, that kind of stuff. Okay, each one has a different attitude to it.
Where do we go? Well, any citizen comments? Any citizen comments? Where do we go? Fred Riley?
There is a code provision that addresses this. It's section 58-32G, and that provision says any person or contractor causing damage to any city road or street while loading or unloading materials, tools, or equipment shall be responsible for the repairs to the damaged road or street. So that does exist. As everybody has noted, the complication comes in identifying who caused the damage, and if there's a construction site, then you at least have some basis to narrow it down. Lynn and I discussed this briefly, and one of the things that I think you could do is, based on that code provision, if a contractor who is working a site does damage things, you could send them a bill, and if they don't pay it, then you have the basis to go to code enforcement and bring a code enforcement case against them for not complying with the city's code. So we talked it through from the standpoint of how do you practically address the situation, and that's one of the ways that you could do it.
Mark?
What you can do, I think it would take a little bit on the city's part, but take a photograph of the curbs and the street for the right around the permit issue time. Have the contractor sign it that he saw that there was no damage. Go back there at the end of the project, take another photograph. If he's free and clear, fine. If not, he pays.
Mark, that's a good point. I mean, you know, you rent a car, they walk you around, they say, show me all the scratches and dents, and we'll mark them off for you, and that'll even photograph them and stuff. You can do the same thing. I mean, it takes a little bit of effort from our city's part, but basically, the GC, whoever's running that job, it's your problem now. You know, you can fight it out with all your, whether it was your brick delivery guy or your wood delivery guy, that's not our problem. The problem is you started with a good road, you started with a good valley curb, it got broken. Here was before, here's afterward. You know, you want to fight it, but maybe, you know, an alternative if we don't want to go the impact fee is to have them either put a deposit or post some type of a bond, and then, you know, we just deduct from it. I don't know, but it seems like a simple way of doing it. And then for the person who is good, they're not paying any extra. So there is a person who's going to be very careful about not scoring up the street and messing things up. So maybe they should be paying.
I think it's two-part, though. I think it's the roadway and curb in front of the house and the wear and tear on the road down the road, not just everything that happens directly in front of the home that's being repaired.
And the damage is not noticed immediately, it builds up over time. I think an impact fee, provided that we guarantee that it is used for maintenance and upkeep of our curbs, gutters, and streets, it's a win. It's a win. It's a win for everyone except for the person who's got to pay a little bit more. But if you're bringing big, heavy equipment in, absolutely, I believe you should have to pay an impact fee because it does do damage. It may not be visible at the time, but you have 10 of them and suddenly you do have physical damage.
Well, maybe it's a good point. We could do both, minimum impact fee depending upon the job. And also photograph the curbs in front of the home. Do both and it'd be a win-win.
Where do you want to go with this? You want to slip some information and
We'll collect some more data for you, and I'll check a little further with the planner, but she's going to be sending us a contract for the comp plan, and I'll talk to her, Linda Fisher, and I'll make a call to Chris Rowe and see where he's at.
we're all in consensus that we move forward with this, at least in concept, right?
Yes.
Okay, good. Okay. Lynn, for next month also, if possible?
Hopefully.
Okay, then let us know. All right, item 3, discuss reducing the speed limit on Gulf Boulevard, Councilmember Aki.
Well, we've talked about this for a while. I know Marv has talked about this. It just kind of makes sense to me that the speed would be consistent with Indian Rock Beach. If you have the speed decrease, that kind of lowers the threshold for the sheriff to give a ticket. Like right now it's 35. If someone's going 44 or 45, they won't get a ticket. But if it's 30, that same person will get a ticket. After a few tickets are given, word gets around, people won't speed through there. If the traffic is going more controlled, slower, it's easier for people to pull out onto Gulf, onto the left, like from 22nd, 21st, Harrison, any of those roads to be able to get out. Hopefully it will decrease traffic in the sense of people going slower around the big houses where they like to stop. It won't be such a drastic going from 40 to 25 to look at the house. Maybe going from 30 to 25 won't be so noticeable, so the traffic would still flow, because we all know around 18th, 19th, the big houses, that's where all the slowdown is, the creepy, and that's not going to go away. So I just wanted to talk about it and stop kicking it down the road, and let's see what steps we need to take to get it done, if that's what we all feel needs to be done.
You say going from 35 to 30?
Just like Indian Rocks.
Would that also encompass the causeway? Just you have Gulf Boulevard, but I mean, why would you want to take 35 on the causeway? It's residential too.
I think that would help on the causeway, because I know a lot of people, you have the whole slow down and all of a sudden they start speeding up because they see that you can. If it stays at 30, then it eliminates that problem.
I'll come to you next, I'll just finish my thought. We've talked about this a long time. Let's do it. Okay, we can't do it unilaterally. I think the best we can do, I'll look over to Lynn because he'll know, I think the best we can do probably is a resolution and tell the county that we want this done because they're both county roads. When we're at whatever procedure they have then to actually make it go down. I don't think it's going to be simple, but I agree. We take these surveys and we say 85% of the people don't break the law. Right, 85% of the real people in the real world don't break the law, but we still have a police force for the 15% that do. And it's those 15% that are speeding at crazy rates. You come out of Indian Rocks, it's all lit up, and there's businesses. You get to Bel Air Beach, it looks like we're asleep at night. And I could hear it where I live, they let it loose. And it's a straightaway, it's a drag strip. And sooner or later, we're going to wake up to carnage out there. Just drop it. I mean, there's no reason, you don't gain anything in our 2-mile city by going 5 extra miles an hour. It's just too small of an area, so it's not like we're picking up anything. And the road is no different here, it's all residential, so I say drop it. Mark? Mark?
I'll agree, we're still going to be able to do 35. So all the people that have been doing 35 for the last 30 years are still going to do 35 because of the latitude. Bel Air Bluff side of the bridge is 30. And if you take your foot off the accelerator coming over the hump, by the time you hit the bottom, you're doing 38 or 40, just coasting. So if you're doing 35 coming down at the Bel Air Beach, you're doing 45 coasting down. And to get out on the Gulf Boulevard, they're doing 45 out there, there's no question about it. They're doing 10 over. Everybody's rule of thumb, I think I've been doing 10 over my whole life. So especially when you started in Clearwater, you can't wait to get off the beach at night, so they're pushing it right to the limit. And, you know, the police have been very kind, and they've been letting that 10 mile an hour over the speed limit go, just the way it is. And we've all come accustomed to it. So I think the only way to curtail some of this stuff is drop it to 30. Be consistent with Bel Air Bluffs, be consistent with Indian Rocks Beach. I mean, hey, there's people crossing the streets, not too much now because of COVID, but when this stuff clears up, our residents are gonna be crossing, and it'd be nice to drop it 10 miles an hour, just for the safety's sake. That's all.
What's your proposal for side streets?
I haven't changed anything I talked about once upon a time, but side streets are the side streets. You want to leave it alone because everybody has been saying don't mess with the side streets, so leave them alone.
Did you have
But
something
we've got to
in mind
make a
for that
stab
also?
on something.
Well, obviously, in the perfect world, we would drop the side streets too, but I'm more of a baby steps. Let's do the 30 miles per hour, let's not throw too many things and get crazy. Let's do 30 miles per hour on golf, and then see how it goes, 6 months, whatever, and then if side streets are still an issue, then we can address those. But let's take the main big problem and address that first.
I have some concerns about unexpected consequences. I don't know, congestion's a problem out there already. What's the impact going to be when you lower the speed limit 5 miles per hour during Easter break or something? I can't even imagine, but I think there's going to be some unexpected consequences to that. The Indian Rocks example, the Narrows. Those roads are down there are super narrow. It's down to 2 lanes there. It's a huge condo community down there. They have a lot more commercial businesses. The condos are on one side of the street, the businesses are on the opposite side of the street, and guess what? People and pedestrians are crossing all day long. They don't use crosswalks. So all of the road hazard lights don't make any difference down there. So you've got narrow roads, you've got flooding issues down there, you've got high pedestrian traffic. 30 miles per hour makes a huge amount of sense down there. We've got a very wide boulevard. There's a center lane there for people turning out. I think it's different. Now, I will also say that the new speed limit sign, I think, is a great addition here, and I would heartily support getting a couple more of those out there, because I think, and I've stood out there for like 15 minutes at a time and watched traffic going past there, and literally, the traffic was going 30 miles an hour or less already. So I think those signs are making, that one sign's making an impact, and I think if you had a couple of them on each side, maybe that's the baby step you should try. That sign was put in by the county. Now I know those traffic signs come with the capability to capture the traffic speed data. I'd be willing to bet this sign doesn't. Does this sign capture the speed data?
I can't answer that question, I'm not really
Yeah,
sure.
I know at the
But they
Little
put-
City's job that I went to, there was like 3 or 4 of these guys all trying to sell their speed traffic calming stuff, and they have options that go into these signs, so you can actually go in on a weekly basis or something and download the speed data. So I mean, it captures you know, the average speed, the time of day, and that kind of stuff. And maybe that's kind of the stuff we should be looking at before we just make a jump here. I understand where you're going with this, and I support the signage. Let's try that maybe, and see if that, but I think Indian Rocks isn't a great example because their situation is a lot different than what we have, and I'm concerned about the unexpected consequences. So I would be more in favor of put some more signs up and see what we get out of that before we just automatically do that.
And to that sign, that sign came out of the discussions that the city manager and I had with Tom Washburn and the folks with the county going back 2 years. I mean, it actually took 2 years to get that sign because I had noticed, and I was told by our law enforcement people that things were slowing down around 18th, 19th Street here because you could only guess that people were looking at the nice houses and stuff. And I actually put myself in a couple traffic jams a couple days, and that was the case. It broke after that as we were heading north. We thought that there was traffic all the way to Clearwater. That wasn't the case, not at least when I drove it. People were slowing down. So that's what that sign was for. And I mean, if it's getting people to maintain the speed limit, then that's terrific. I don't know, though, the guy who's going to unleash the motorcycle at 70 miles an hour, if anything, is going to make him stop. And, you know, we do have, I just don't see what the big urgency in our city to get through that extra 5 miles quicker. I just don't see it. It's 30 miles on one side of the bridge. And somebody told me it was the only bridge in the country that has 2 different speed limits on it. I mean, and it's probably right, because I've never seen that. One side has one speed limit, one side has another. If I can't go through Bel Air Bluffs at 35, then why are you coming through Bel Air Beach? I mean, we're all residential. It's all houses outside there. You know, of course, condos up in the northern part of our city, but for the most part, it's all houses. Mark?
You know, we've got a similar situation in Indian Rocks Beach. On the north end of Indian Rocks Beach, there's a lot less congestion, a lot less residents. And I've been going through there for over 20 years. I have no problem making it through Indian Rocks Beach at 30 miles an hour. The thing that we have more of on this end is on the weekends, and right over this past year, the traffic's been less. But when things are in full swing, we have a lot of bicycles that go between here and Clearwater. And, you know, unfortunately, they do not follow the rules. And when it comes up to the causeway area and people are flying at 45 miles an hour, and you come to all of our islands we got, it gets a little risky when they're 2 and 3 abreast. But Glenn, I understand you're a data-driven guy. I appreciate that, but still, in all sense of the word, safety has always been my thing, and I still feel that pulling out of there when these cars are going by at 40 is not safe. Pulling out when you've got cars coming from both ways at 40 miles an hour, they're trying to get in the middle of the lane. I can't tell you how many times I got close where I get almost clipped. That's just the nature of the beast.
What makes you sure that slowing traffic down is not going to make them get closer together? I'm just, hear me out for a minute, okay? 35 going across Bel Air Causeway, I understand coming back, that's a problem. And I think that we actually discussed putting one of those speed limit signs at the bottom of the bridge.
We do.
And is that actually going to happen, or?
Yeah, Tom Washburn put a box out here, and I've got a call into him about does data come out of those boxes or does it come, you know, out of the flashing lights?
Right.
And I asked him for an update on that, and I haven't heard back from him, but yeah, that's the plan. So when you're coming down the bridge, and what we're looking at is it'll be a little bit across past this Eileen's house. And that way you can see that flashing coming down, just like you do on the other side. And we started with one going north because that was the biggest issue with people thinking we were speeding going that way, or the public was. The county pays for those, so it's not going to cost us anything. It's just a matter of lobbying to get additional approval.
Okay, so anyway, the point I was making, if we put a sign up coming down the hill, going past City Hall and entering Gulf Boulevard, we don't really know what that's going to do. We don't know if that's going to help or not, but I would at least like to see if it would help before we went lowering our speed limit. Now, going the other direction, this is what I've noticed. If I'm coming from Indian Rocks Beach, whatever that is, if I'm coming from Indian Rocks Beach, and I'm going through the Narrows, it's bumper to bumper, it's 30 miles per hour. As soon as we hit 35, I've noticed that suddenly there's distance between the cars. And people aren't, they're not on each other's tail the whole time. Then, whenever you get back, you make the right turn, you go over the bridge, everybody's spaced out pretty well. As soon as you get down to the hill, boom, everybody's backed up again. And the reason why I'm asking for the council to at least try adding that one more sign, and let's see what we get before we completely change it, is because I'm not sure if it's really going to help. You know, I understand the safety issue, but at the same time, if everybody's bumper to bumper because you've slowed everybody down from somewhere else, and it starts as soon as you're entering Bel Air Bluff down West Bay, the speed limit changes and everybody, you have a traffic light and then you have bumper to bumper traffic until it speeds up to 35 again. And so, you know, I'm not 100% sold on slowing us down without some sort of proof that that's the way we go, because once we do it, I don't think there's going back.
My fear again is the unexpected consequences. In numerous conversations we've had about traffic problems here at Bel Air Beach, the resounding problem I always hear is, and it comes from Marv, is getting out of the side streets. There's no breaks in the traffic. So it's a time, speed, distance problem. If you slow down the traffic, they gotta get closer together, and you get my mom driving down the road, and if it's 30 miles, well, she's gonna drive at 20, and guess what? All those other spring breakers behind her are driving at 20. I'm just concerned with the unexpected consequences.
We solved one problem by letting them turn on the red. But that's what created all the cars coming over and you can't get out. So now that they can turn on the red, that created a problem getting out in the traffic. We used to have a break. Nobody could make a turn. You could get out every so often. Every time that light changes, now it's a continuous flow. So that's where the problem occurs. And again, it's only on the weekends. If it happens to be the weekend, you have to get out. You're having a rough time because that traffic does not stop coming around the corner.
I beg to differ with you, they stop at 18th in front of those big houses, we've just proved it, so I don't know.
19 or 20, you had to go with more big ones up there, and everybody would
Just
stop and take
saying.
pictures.
If I can address what Dave and Glenn were saying, to me, the 30 to 35, if you're going 30, and then the next area is 30, nothing changes. You keep going, it's like a consistent flow of traffic. The problem with the stop and go comes is when the hot rod's like, ooh, now I can go 45, and grandma's like, oh, now I'm gonna go 25, and that's the difference. But if it's a consistent thing, there's no reason to up, down your speed to get that variable, it's a constant. Obviously, grandma and hot rod are always gonna be there, but for the most part, it's kind of like on the highway. When it's 70 miles per hour, there's a steady flow. As soon as you get to that 60, it slows down. You get to 70, it goes up and down because of some people minding the speed limit and some people not. So to me, it's more of a constant flow. And yeah, you're right. Like that did hurt us coming out, but it helped the bridge. So it's kind of like one of those things you have to deal with. But if they were going slower, maybe there were more opportunities to squeeze out without somebody going faster. So I think it's worth a shot.
What do you, Fred, yeah, I'm gonna go with you, Fred, or Lynn. As I mentioned it before, because we can debate this all night, and we don't have to, because we just put this up as a resolution, and you can get a up or down, yes or no vote on it. But the question is how, is that the right way to do this? Because the county, we can't tell the county what to do, we could only tell them what our council agrees with. So what's the right procedure if we wanted to go forward with this?
Well, I think you probably have to adopt a resolution to ask them. And I'll clarify that with them also to make sure that that's the process. I know when the bridge was built, there was that discussion back and forth. And at the time, the city council didn't want the speed limit lowered to what the other side did. And there was a discussion with the other side to try to raise theirs, and they didn't want to do it either. Clearwater's is 35, Indian Rocks is 30, so they're kind of all over the place, everywhere you go. You go a block past Publix and it's 35. So, you've got places that are 200 feet long, so.
Can I ask a quick question just regarding the county? Gulf Boulevard is also occupied by Bel Air Shores. So I don't think we can unilaterally ask Pinellas County to change the speed limit without participation from Bel Air Shores.
Right, that's true. It would probably have to be both on that section with their cities.
Which is all the way almost the length of our city.
Yeah. We get it all, I'm glad I can go back to you. So Fred, you, and then Dave next.
I wanted to address section 58-4, which is a provision in the city code related to speed limits. Subsection D states, amendment, all speed limit zones established by this section shall be lawful until such time as they are amended by the city council. No amendment to the provisions of this section shall be enacted by the city council until after an investigation determines such a change is reasonable, as stated in Florida statute section 316.189(1). So I think based on that provision, the most appropriate thing, if you want to consider this, especially because Gulf Boulevard is not under your jurisdiction, is to ask Lynn or direct Lynn to initiate a conversation with somebody at the county level to at least raise this as a possibility. And then I don't know in the past what the investigation has entailed, whether it's I assume it's some sort of a study, but that's what your code requires. So I think that to me is the starting point, is to at least have a discussion with somebody at the county.
Didn't we have Tom Washburn stand like right here and say that we could do that? I think he did tell us that not too long ago. I mean, that's who we've been dealing with I've been dealing with him for 2 years. Lynn's been dealing with him longer than that. So I don't know what else we have to do. I mean, I know we can't tell him to change it. And yes, there's another city involved. I got that. At least up till 19th Street, and it's all ours. But what do we, study it again? I mean, we're studying this thing to death here. I don't know what else this council says we think it's in the safety of the city to reduce the speed, and it'll come up for a vote. I mean, it has to get 4 votes. Then that recommendation goes to the county. Then it's up to whatever their procedure is. That's why I asked before, what is the procedure? Because I thought Tom Washburn told us that we could ask them to lower the speed limit. But that's what he said last time he was here. I could have heard him wrong, but.
Well, that's why I think it's, what I've heard is you want me to get a little more direction from the county. We need to clarify the other city's position as far as they're concerned, if they want to lower or raise. And then I'll come back to you with that information.
Robin, does that work for you in terms of the timetable? You could bring this up as soon as next meeting, but it sounds as if we get better information, it might have a better chance for everybody to be behind it or not be behind it.
I'm open for whatever's best. I don't mind more information. I'm just tired of getting more information and having the same information a year later and I still have nothing done.
Well, to you, but I have no problem asking the county. Tom's been pretty good with us, but sometimes it takes Tom a little while. I'm being very nice with that. I mean, there's times it's taken Tom months to get back to us, so.
And I'll do the
If
second.
we can move that
call.
along in real time, you know.
Yeah, and I'll talk to Whit, that might help.
Okay.
I'd just like to add a final comment. If you see the traffic from Causeway going south on Gulf Boulevard, it's like a racetrack. On the weekends, when you got a lot of cars are turning south, it's a racetrack getting to the merge area. All you can hear is accelerating engines when they make that. And Mayor, I think you can attest,
I hear it every night, particularly on the weekends.
especially on the weekends. That's the other bad spot.
Nice though thing the other night, I heard another engine that was roaring even better. It was the sheriff, so that was one for the good guys.
Three things. One is, with respect to stabilized traffic, how many times have you gone down a road where you're doing 50 miles an hour and all of a sudden traffic's backed up for a mile, creeping along bumper to bumper, and you get past them and it's like the traffic opens up and there was nothing there on the side of the road. It's because those pulses build up and any traffic engineer will tell you those pulses on the stop and go traffic can hang as long as 30 minutes to an hour. So if you throw in traffic lights, you throw in pedestrian crossings, you get these big pigs moving through the snake there, and those are the things. No, it's not just because everybody's doing 30, it's going to stay 30. One of the models that was used for the traffic calming protocol came from the Pinellas County, so I don't know what's involved in this stuff. And that's the stuff that needs to be clarified. You know, I don't know where this anecdotal drag strip stuff's coming from. I don't hear it at my end.
Of course you don't, you're 6 blocks in.
I hear it, I'm across the street from you.
And I'm out.
Come over on a Saturday night.
Because I do, I ride a motorcycle at night and I ride
It's in the,
Gulf Boulevard and I don't hear it. And I'm not seeing my buddies out there and the traffic's moving at 30, 35 miles an hour, so I'm not quite sure.
I can hear it from my backyard, and I'm right across the street from you.
I think a
And
lot
I'm
of
out there all the time too, and I don't hear it.
I think it's back to the perception, right? You hear the loud sounds of the motorcycle, and some of those, you know, little fast motorcycles the young guys ride, you know, they rev up the engine, they're not necessarily, it's kind of like I'm standing on my street talking to a neighbor and someone goes by, and clearly they weren't going over the speed limit, but when you're standing in the street and it was perception. It felt like they went past us too fast, but they weren't going. I'm certain they were not going over the speed limit. And so we have to be cautious that we're not perceiving that there's a problem that may or may not be there. I have a lot of the same problems you have, Mark, getting out, but you know, it's part of it. You know, I don't care if I'm pulling out here or trying to pull out of Publix. You can't get out of Publix either. So I can't ask them to change the traffic situation on West Bay Drive because I'm nervous about pulling out into traffic. I mean, and that's really, it's my old age and inability to see that makes it hard for me to pull out in traffic up there, so.
I guess I get scared when I use the old car.
Basically, what I see is that you could put a 5-mile-per-hour speed limit out there, and no matter what, someone is going to do 50. It's just going to happen. I'm not saying that you guys have a bad idea, but I'm also not saying that you have a good one either, because for a year and a half, we debated slowing down 22nd Street. All of the neighborhoods wanted that. We weren't even discussing Gulf Boulevard at the time. It was just the feeder streets, because everybody drag races down that and people are going to get killed. And for whatever reason, it didn't go through. We just couldn't come to an agreement. The citizens nobody wanted they didn't want the speed limit changed. They didn't want speed humps. They didn't want flashing signs. They didn't want anything. They just wanted everybody to slow down. And there was no citizen buy-in. Well, now that there's no way that one would go, we're going to Gulf Boulevard, or at least that's the appearance that I'm seeing, is that I'm afraid that we're just looking for a win on something. Can we slow somebody down somewhere?
I tell you, if you
I just don't want to go that route unless there's a true payoff.
If you sit on my deck and you watch the bridge, which you can see the cars ride going forward and down over that bridge. So you know they're not doing 30 miles an hour.
Right, and I asked nicely if we could get a speed sign that alerts people what they're doing. I see that sign and I'm embarrassed to allow somebody to see me doing 3 or 4 miles over that speed limit sign as you're entering Bel Air Bluff. I just think it's something we should at least give it a chance before we go to the full extreme of lowering the entire city's speed limit.
Lynn, did you find out when you're speaking with Tom, I mean, again, 2 years is not gonna work, okay? And I want this to be in Robin's lifetime, she's brought this up multiple times. It's not gonna be in Mark's lifetime, he put 2 times on council. Let's try and get this, in some of our lifetimes.
Ouch!
Unless you wanna run again. But one second, and so ask Tom how quickly we can get those other signs. To Dave's point, I'm coming over, I'm sorry, 35 is the right number on that bridge when you're coasting downhill, because you're gonna be doing a little more. But when I see that sign, I hit the brakes, because I want to pass that sign doing 30. And I think that they can be effective. So it is maybe an alternative to dropping it. The guy who's going to rev up his hot rod or his motorcycle, he's going to see how high that sign will go up before it'll stop giving him a number. So they don't care. I mean, I've seen drag racing on the street. Again, I live there, so I don't just ride by it once or twice. I live there 24/7. I can sit in my office and see the traffic. And I can tell you just by looking at them if they're going exceptionally fast. And I would say 90% of the people follow the rule. It's not the 90%. It's the 10% that are going to kill someone. So that's where we're, I guess, going. And this really has to come up for a resolution if we're going to do it, but I think we need more information. Clint?
We've done speed surveys on Gulf. We've done them over and over, and it keeps coming back with the same answer. So obviously the police and the sheriff's office have an opinion on this. We have different thoughts on this thing, and no amount of debate is going to change this thing here. So it may be time to survey the residents of Bel Air Beach to see if there's a problem on Bel Air Beach, because on Gulf Boulevard, because I have a different construct of speed, and no matter, just like you said, that kid on his Gixxer motorcycle made it. But 30 miles an hour speed limit is certainly not going to change that. So, that one guy poops in his pants and we all end up wearing diapers. So that's the analogy here. And so let's see if the rest of the residents of Bel Air Beach have this construct that we've got this speeding problem. And my God, there's blood in the streets here. And let's see if other people agree with that, or they're saying, hey man, I want to get to work in the morning. I don't want to sit there and wait for cars, whatever. So maybe we need to put out a survey there and survey the residents.
Let's just make it happen in real time and not study this one to death. I mean, you're right, we've had enough data, but I discounted data only not that it shows 85% are compliant. I can tell you that without a box. You can stand there and you can see most people are doing the speed limit. It's not, again, what I said before, most people don't break the law, but you don't get rid of your police force because there's that 5 or 10% of people that break the law, and those are the ones you want to catch. Same deal here, it's the 5 or 10% that are causing the problem. It's not the people who are adhering to the rules.
I'm not following here. How is lowering the speed limit 5 miles an hour going to stop those
Because it lowers,
recalcitrants who are going to speed all the time?
it lowers the threshold for ticket giving. And
Those are
if they
the
start
guys that are
getting
gonna get the
tickets,
tickets.
then that's gonna deter
But
them.
you can't have a guy there 7 by 24. That's the problem.
No, more 24/7, but you can have them there when they're there and they catch the guy because they're not gonna have that, okay, they're going 45, it's fine, now it's gonna be, oh, they're going 45, it's supposed to be 40, let's give it the ticket.
It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. You can't have a guy there all the time.
Well, of course you're not gonna have the guy there all the time, but when they are there, they'll have the opportunity to catch somebody. You never have a guy there anytime.
If those guys are speeding already, why aren't they getting caught?
Well, if they're going
They're
45
access to
now,
35,
it lowers the threshold. You got that 5, 10.
they're, by your own
One line
admission,
at a time.
by your own admission, you're saying they're way over the 35 miles an hour, so they're way outside that 5 mile per hour threshold. They're already outside the threshold, so they should be getting tickets already.
I agree, and we've already talked about that with the sheriffs, but this gives them even more latitude because now they'll have a lower threshold.
They're not writing those tickets because they're not there to catch them.
It's kind of it bounces back and forth forever. The problem is there's too much latitude, always been too much latitude. If you drop it to 5, hey, 15 over ticket is gonna nail you. You get a couple of those and you're done.
And I agree, so if that Gixxer guy's out there doing 60 miles an hour using Gulf Boulevard as a drag strip, and a sheriff sees him, he's going to write him a ticket. As a matter of fact, he may very well put him in cuffs and take him down to the jail. The issue is, he's still not being caught. So what's the difference whether the speed limit sign says 35 or 30? He's already so far in excess of the speed limit. If the sheriff was there, he's going to write him up anyway. The sheriff isn't there.
Well, it's not just the speed racers going 60 or 70. We all know that they're out. It's the ones that are going like 45, 47. That now, if the speed limit was 30, then over 40, 41, they'd get a ticket and stop doing that. It's not, we all know the extremes are, just like grandma going 10 should also get a ticket. So, take out the extremes, because yes, they should automatically get a ticket regardless, now or 30 miles per hour. I'm talking about the ones that are pushing the limits. Those are the ones that are in excess, or not in excess, those are the ones that are still going too fast, but not crazy speed racer. So those are the ones that are gonna get caught more. It's gonna get a reputation of, hey, you gotta mind the rules, and people are gonna slow down, and it's gonna be more orderly and reasonable as far as speed.
If the vast majority of traffic is moving at 30 to 35 already, where are these people doing 45 to 50? There's no room between the traffic to be accelerating to 50 miles an hour.
Once you pass 18th and 19th, after the big houses.
Excuse me. May I say something?
You may.
Okay, so our city code, section 58.4, subsection C, has a provision on how we handle this. I say we take a step back, we follow our code, we get Lynn engaged, talking to the county, talking to the adjacent city, because there's nothing that we can do anyway. We can sit here and argue this all day, and we can't even do anything without meeting that criteria first.
Okay, so let's, Lynn, you'll get on it, you'll get back to us. This is a work session item, so this is another one for a follow-up at hopefully the next work session if we can. And see what kind of timetables and what they do. Yes, you have to speak to across the street. It's bad enough we got a bridge that has 2 speed limits. We're not gonna have a street that has 2 speed limits on each different side. That's crazy, so, yeah.
Something we could do of our own volition, though, is put up a couple more of those flashing digital speed
We can
signs.
check on that too, what we can do about it.
That's something we could immediately, that's a quick hitter kind of thing.
Yeah, I've already requested the one for here. This one, they did the speed study, I want to say, end of November, and we got it this week. So it takes a couple months, but my understanding from Tom is they have a contract set up for those already, so we could get them. The first day, I will say, this one was kind of jumping around. I saw Jody speeding at 80.
I was
Actually,
doing
couldn't
nine.
see it.
I was doing 0.9 one day.
But then when I went back another couple times, I don't know if it was calibrating itself, like yesterday and today, it was right on. My speedometer is what I was doing, and it does slow the traffic down, I will say that. It does do that, because people are more cognizant of what's going on. So I'll bring something back to you, and then we'll move on with that.
Folks, we'll be going 2 hours. Everybody good? Just to push through. Some of these may go quickly, but I never know. All right, item 5, discussion and formation of a procedure to address partial attendance at council meetings and work sessions brought by me. How to record partial attendance at council meetings with respect to the absence policy. I just was thinking about, we now have an absence policy. This is not about any individuals. This is about, we've had a couple of instances where people have had to leave for, they don't have to give us a reason, medical reason or what have you. They attend a half a meeting or a quarter of a meeting or something like that. Without driving Patty crazy, how do we deal with this? Do you get credit for a meeting when you come here and participate, when you answer the bell and count at the roll? Do you get credit when you go through a whole meeting? I don't have an answer. I figure we better figure it out before it starts to, we start to get partial absences. So what do we do with people who don't, aren't able to stay for a whole meeting or are late, what have you? Obviously, we don't want to ding a person who's 5 minutes late, but, 2 hours late, have you attended the meeting? So what do we do?
I'm going to go back to what we said previously when we talked about this. We're all adults. I think that if someone has to leave a meeting, it may be because they have a prior obligation, there's something that's pressing, if they're late, they may be late coming from work, they may have had a sick child, they may have had a number of things, and I think if it's just not an issue. It hasn't been an issue, and I think that if you're here, that you get counted as present. There's no, because Robin had to take her child to the doctor and shows up 20 minutes late, that's foolish to count someone absent for something like that. I just don't think it's not a problem. We haven't had an issue with anyone, not attending meetings, and I just don't see it as being an issue. I don't think it needs to be discussed.
Well, it's going to be discussed. I don't know if we're going to do anything on it, but what do we, if we want to take a wait and see, that's fine. We'll wait and see. But if you show up for 5 minutes, then it's as good as showing up for 3 hours, basically. Is that what we want?
I'm with Jody that I think right now I think a couple instances that I can think of, are rare. So I would say, let's hold this off until it becomes a regular problem with everybody doing it. Jody does it next meeting and I do it the next one, or if it's a single person, whatever the issue arises, let's just, I would say, wait until it becomes an issue before we try to solve the issue.
You pretty much agree with that? Okay, we'll wait and see then. Item 6. Discussion regarding amending ordinance section 26-3D pertaining to city council discussion of current or prospective lawsuits. Discussion of need for regular updates to the city and the city council from the city attorney regarding status of lawsuits or threatened lawsuits brought by me. Description. Discussion over restrictiveness of ordinance, constitutional implications, and how it impairs the city's ability, I should say, to address threatened lawsuits or actual lawsuits. Discussion of need to keep city council and the city informed of lawsuit and threatened lawsuit status. We're not going to discuss any particular lawsuits. This is just about the section, and I raised this to Fred just in a casual conversation. He was actually the one who found this section, but our present ordinance says, the presiding officer on the request of the city attorney shall rule out of order discussion by the city council of matters that are the subject of any current or prospective litigation. My take on this, and Fred, I'm going to be asking you next what you think, but my take on this has got a couple issues here. First issue is that we're allowing some individuals to speak on this, namely the public and not the council. And I think that, since this is a public forum, a limited one at that, you're denying individuals the right to speak about it. I understand the logic behind it. You don't want to in any way encumber the lawsuit, the threatened lawsuit. So that's problem number one. I think everyone should have the right to speak, or no one should have the right to speak in here. We can set the rule either way. But when you let some citizens speak, we're citizens too, and then you say other citizens can't speak, I think you've got a potential problem. That's number one. That's the constitutional issue. The second issue is that we actually shoot ourselves in the foot. This is a policy that was not brought by this council. This goes back, I looked, to 1999 or 2007. It's an older policy. I think the spirit of Florida Sunshine Law says that council's supposed to be able to speak about litigation. I don't see how you could solve litigation. Okay, we have several, I think 4 or 5 letters that I've seen of late, over the last year. I don't know the status of some of those, and neither does the city. In a lot of cases, I don't even know if the city realizes that there's even threatened litigation. We don't get to talk about threatening litigation. We don't get to talk about actual litigation. So I guess my question to you is, somebody wants to bring a lawsuit. We can't talk about it up here as a council, so you can't diffuse it early. You can't stop it before it gets to court if there's any merit to settling. They can't settle it outside of here because it's my understanding that the city council has to approve any settlements of lawsuits or potential lawsuits. And then when there's an actual lawsuit, we can't settle that either. So what are we supposed to do? Take every case to a jury trial? I mean, there's provisions in the Florida Code to operate in the shade, legally in the shade on lawsuits. And you have to have a stenographer and it has to be done according to the rules. But you actually can meet as a council and discuss these things. I don't see how we could ever settle any litigation short of taking it to a jury trial based on this restricted policy. So, I know I've spoken to you about it, just casually, but I wanted to bring it up because we saw stuff the other week, and there's stuff out there, and what do we do with this stuff? Just let it go to jury trial? That may not be the best and smartest move, so. I'll go to you and then come back to council.
Okay, I'll try to address the points you raised. The first one with respect to, you read the city code provision, and that addresses the citizens addressing the city council. The problem you have every time a citizen comes to the podium is you don't know what they're going to say, and you at least have to listen to them for some period of time till you really get some understanding of what they're going to say. And oftentimes people are inartful and nervous and everything else, and it's difficult to really know what they're talking about. So that, to me, I know that's I'm stating the obvious, but that it's a practical problem every time that a citizen comes to the podium. It's not unique to Bel Air Beach, I will say that. Having said this, when it's come up in the past, I made y'all aware of what your current rules are, and that's what you're obligated to comply with until y'all see fit to change your current rules. And you could change your current rules if you wanted to. I want to separate apples and oranges between prospective litigation and current litigation. If it is current litigation, there is a Florida statute provision, which is 286.011 subsection 8, that provides you with the ability to have they typically refer to as a shade meeting, where the city council meets. This is a notice thing, and you reconvene out of the public with the attorney and a court reporter who records the shade meeting. At the shade meeting, you're obligated, it's a narrow exception to the Sunshine Law, and you have to really do two things, and that's defined by statute. The subject matter of the meeting shall be confined to settlement negotiations or strategy sessions related to litigation expenditures. That's what you're supposed to discuss in a shade meeting. Anything outside of that narrow scope is off limits, and if you insist on discussing other things related that are outside the scope of that provision, then you're arguably violating the Sunshine Law. So, if you, under your current code is consistent with section 286.0118, because it relates to pending litigation. The one that I think is obviously far more problematic is prospective. And prospective litigation is, it could be a citizen coming before you and saying, I'm going to sue the city. And, when they say those magic words, does that now trigger this code provision? Arguably it does. The other more common thing that happens is the city manager receives a claim letter from an attorney that is following the statutory requirement of giving the municipality notice in advance that there is they intend to someday in the future file a claim, and they're putting the city on notice, and the purpose of that statute, to my understanding, is to give the city an opportunity to evaluate whether that claim has merit, and if so, then to do something about addressing it and potentially resolving it prior to it having to go to have a lawsuit filed and then going through the court proceeding. So I'm not going to tell you it's not a quandary. It is a quandary because the way the code's written. The way, and I don't like saying the way around it, because my job's not to find the way around things in the context of circumventing things. The way to address it that we've done in the past is if there is litigation, there's something that needs to be discussed, then typically I've had a one-on-one conversation with each of the city council members. I have the typical restrictions on me. I can't poll 7 people and, I don't share information. What I do is I say the same thing 7 different times to 7 different individuals and explain to them this is the nature of the claim, this is where it stands, and this is what the city is going to do about it. There are typically, I would say, a number of different types of claims. I'll pick 2 for convenience. One is there's an injury that occurs on city property. That is typically going to be covered by the city's insurance. So when we get that claim letter, Lynn and I have received several of those, and we typically coordinate, and of course the city has an insurer. The claim letter is provided to the insurer, and they assign claims counsel that then reviews the status of the claim and prepares to mount a defense if this is a case that's going to go forward. The other type of claim that is, periodically happens with a municipality is a civil rights type claim. And when that comes in, that's also an insured risk, and it goes through the same process. The letter comes in to the city manager, him and I discuss it, and we immediately get it to the city's insurer, who assigns claims counsel that evaluates the claim and what to do about it. The missing link is what Mayor Manzo has identified, is once it has been communicated to the city's claims counsel, then how does the information flow back and forth from the claims counsel? And I would use a very generic example. If the city got a claims for a personal injury, such as a slip and fall, then the claims counsel could do the same thing that I have done, which is communicate with individual city council members as to the status of the claim and provide information as to what is the thought process about defending the city against the potential claim. But all this being said, I don't have a magic bullet about discussions related to prospective litigation that occur here. And that, again, you've identified what is a quandary, and that is simply what it is.
Fred, it's not just prospective litigation. The way I read this, and I agree, it was my point on that, and I'm glad you agree with that, but it's also on once the lawsuit, any lawsuit is filed, reading this thing, I would have to stop any discussion, even if we were in the shade. According to this, we can't discuss this. This is not a good rule. This rule needs to go.
Well,
Because we need
I
the
would
ability as a
disagree with
council
you
to be able to discuss this stuff, and, you know, if trial counsel recommends to us that the case be settled and not risk a monumental jury award, that's up for counsel here to say, yeah, we're gonna listen to counsel and trial counsel and settle this case up, or no, we don't listen, take it to trial. According to this, I have to stop any discussion that the council is having on this. I don't know what we're supposed
Well,
to do.
I disagree with you on that.
Okay.
I think the section 2-63, which is addressing the city council, is oriented towards, the other rules are towards citizens addressing the city council. I think the shade meeting is certainly sanctioned by section 286.0118 in Florida statutes, and I think that is different from this.
Shall rule out of order discussion by the city council of matters that are the subject of any current or prospective litigation. So we convene in the shade and trial counsel says, hey, good idea to settle this one, and I have to say, sorry, we can't discuss this. That's the way I'm interpreting it, and I guess I'm the presiding officer, so I can't understand it. I'm also an attorney. To me, it says I can't talk about it. And forget about, yes, the citizen one is another issue, but this is actual litigation. How do you settle it? How do we approve a settlement? Even if you come to an agreement, the city council has to still approve the settlement.
But I'm drawing a distinction between section 2-63, which is addressing the council, and this rule pertains to a citizen coming to the podium at a public meeting and addressing the council. All the other rules are oriented towards that.
I see what you're doing. Okay. So you're saying it's addressing, the citizen addressing. Okay. So then you've convinced me, because this is only dealing with the addressing of the council. The only issue we have now is who should,
I
should
sure
this be
hope
equal?
Patty Gentry noted that,
What's that?
that I convinced you.
So,
That's a downside of not being able to have laugh and smile.
so this only deals with addressing the council. So we can meet, according to the shade meeting, and discuss this stuff. The problem comes in, there can't be any discussion. The citizens can speak on something, the council can't speak back.
Well, I'll say what to me is obvious, but at times I realize it's not as obvious. My assessment of this provision is that the real policy reason behind it is that the council shouldn't be put in the position of, in a public meeting with no notice, having to respond to a citizen coming before them and explaining the basis for a lawsuit that's either prospective or pending. And the purpose of that, when it gets down to it, is the council should not be in a position where you're going to have to say things that legally could be a admission against interest. That's what you're trying to avoid. And that, to me, that policy goes to both a prospective litigation case and a current litigation case. I mean, the safe thing for the council is if somebody comes forward and comes to the podium and says, I'm here to tell you that I'm going to file a lawsuit against the city because of this claim, the appropriate response is, we should not address that at this time. You should contact our attorney and he will be glad to address whatever your claim is. But to me, it's dangerous for y'all to address prospective or pending claims in public because there's that risk.
Right, but let me play the lawyer. Constitutionally, you're allowing the citizen, again, all 7 of us are citizens too. We just happen to have an elected title too. A citizen can speak, but you can't speak back. I know it's best practice, and I know the admonition should probably come from you anytime that situation comes up, like, council member, before you speak, let me remind you, don't say anything, please don't say anything against interest. But if that council member wants to get up there and unload, this stops it. And can we legally do that? I don't know that you can, okay? Because that council member could go and say that right outside 5 minutes later, and I don't know how you can prohibit it here constitutionally, legally, in a public forum.
Well, I'll give you my response to that. A citizen coming before you is speaking on their own behalf about their claim. That's typically what you're going to have, okay? But you, each of the 7 of you are certainly citizens. You certainly have constitutional rights, but you also have a special position, which is you're a elected official, and as an elected official, part of your obligation is to do things to represent the collegial body and to not do things that put the collegial body in an awkward position when it comes to potential lawsuits. So, I'm not a person that is, receptive to trampling on anybody's constitutional rights, including the 7 of you, but I'm just saying, y'all have a special position because you are elected officials, and your obligation when you're sitting here, and actually I would say it's a 24-hour-a-day obligation, as long as you're an elected official, is to protect the interest of the city that you represent.
Glenn?
When I first had this pointed out to me, this limitation or constraint of my discussion in the council, I thought it was the stupidest thing I'd ever heard. But as I've kind of been apprised of all the protections it affords us, it makes sense to me now, this admission against interest thing. I mean, the last thing we want to do is sit up here and, in a recorded format, have something slip or say something that's going to be used against the city in a trial or case or a settlement or whatever. So I've become very comfortable with the process, and because the Florida League of Cities is typically our representative legally and insurance-wise on this stuff, let them handle it, and when they make a decision, they'll come to us, and then we can have a meeting in the shade or however we decide this thing. But I think it really is in our best interest to, let's not discuss it. I mean, it's, something can slip, anything can be used against us, and it all makes kind of sense now. Something else I have a divergent view on is a citizen can step forward and comment, not just necessarily as, hey, I'm bringing a suit against the city, but if they have an understanding of what we're involved in, they can make citizens comments about that stuff too. We can't engage in it. I think that's again, smart. We don't do that. To think that we could just take off our council hat and speak as a citizen, First Amendment, I'm sorry, I have a divergent opinion. I think we have additional sensitivities, and as Fred just pointed out to us, we have responsibilities, and I don't think we can just take off a hat and speak freely based on my feelings or interpretations of an issue as a citizen, because guess what? When that's reported, it's not reported as Glenn Gunn of Donato Drive. It's reported as Councilmember Glenn Gunn said this. And you cannot just take that hat off and separate yourself from that thing. So there are additional constraints placed upon us, and I'd be very cautious about just saying, hey, well, I've got First Amendment rights. I'm going to make my point. No, I think that's wrong. And you certainly don't make, even if that's the route you want to go, you don't make that assertion from up here, you make it from down there. Because, again, it's that separation thing. You make that First Amendment statement from here, guess what? No, you're sitting in the mayor's seat and the presiding officer's seat, and that's the way it's reported. If you want to pass the gavel and go down to the podium, well, yeah, okay, you might be able to pass that one off. But other than that, I think the tact is zip it and let the Florida League of Cities handle it, and when they're ready to do something with it, they'll come to us.
I heard what you said, and I make a distinction, and I'm going to be the thorn or a piece of sand in your shoe, Mr. Riley, okay? Because this is the only time I can speak with you, so I have to bring this out in a public forum here. There's a difference between what's smart and what's constitutionally legal. I don't disagree with anything you just said and anything that Fred Riley just said in terms of it being a smart move that we don't get into the intricacies. Somebody could come up here unload on us, and it's probably best practice that we keep our mouths shut. By the same token, this law says you must, you shall, I have to knock it off. If I'm, as presiding officer, I'm charged with shutting it down, and actually it puts responsibility on you. The question isn't, is it smart? It's probably not smart to answer it back. The question is it constitutional the way we have this written? Okay, if we have the right to say it, you have a lot of rights. You don't have to always use them. I tell that to people all the time. So just because you have the right to do certain things doesn't mean you must exercise that right. The question comes in, is this the way it's written? And I think you acknowledged it before, it's a quandary. I call it something different, but I have an issue with this, okay? This is a limited public forum. We have rules of decorum and how we have to treat each other. It's not anything goes, so you can restrict it within reason. But when you say, you can talk about it, somebody out there, you can talk about it, but you can't talk about it. Well, maybe to your point, well, maybe you have to step down and say, I'm Joe Citizen tonight, right now, speaking about this. It's fine. But we're saying, no, you can't talk about it at all. And that's where the constitutionality of this comes in. That's my only concern, actually, of everything I brought. You've cleared up the whole thing about the other piece addressing council, so I don't think that that's an issue. I have no question that if Florida League of Cities comes back to us and says, settle this case, we'll call a shade meeting, we'll do it properly. That's not a problem. It's what happens in this situation if someone comes forward. Now Zoom, if things opened up to the, once we start Zooming it, that's opened up to the whole country conceivably. So what do we do before it happens? Because I don't want to be in a position as presiding officer or the next presiding officer comes in, I don't want to put anybody in a position to say, shut that person down, and that person says, well, you violated my rights, and now we got another lawsuit. So I'm not asking for an answer tonight. I'm just saying, does this bear looking into? Because to me, you got a limited public forum and you're not treating people the same inside that forum. That's fine.
Well, I'll give you an answer. If this provision was not in the code, once I figured out what they were talking about, I would be raising my hand and interjecting that if this person is making a claim against the city, then this is not the appropriate forum for the council to respond to that claim, and I would advise the council to not respond to the claim. And that, of course, requires some degree of discretion and discipline. And, the comment was made earlier, everybody's an adult here. I will tell you, when I'm attacked, I am ready for the battle myself. Each of y'all are. And it is difficult to sit there and listen to somebody detail all the ills and all the gory details of what they think is a really valid claim against you. Except, in this case, the claim is really against the city. And that's why I keep going back to, you as the elected officials are obligated to look out for the best interest of the city, and in my opinion, the appropriate thing to do is to note that the person is making a claim, and the city commission or city council at this point should not have an open discussion of it. That's difficult to do, but that's what I recommend you do. And I know what you may are thinking, okay, well, that's fine, great explanation, but you're not addressing the constitutionality. And
But if somebody says, I want to speak, what do you do?
well, I would say you have constitutional rights, you don't waive them by being an elected official, but the position you hold as an elected official when you're representing the organization should take substantial precedent, and I would tell you to do that.
So maybe this needs to change and say we don't rule it out of order, that statement that you just made, that discussions, this is a limited public forum and we can restrict it, again, as long as we're doing this evenly, we can say that any discussions regarding legal will not be entertained by the council. That eliminates it. Now a citizen can't come through and say, I'm going to sue you, I'm going to do this, you guys are horrible, you're this, that, and the other. Hey, there's our city attorney over here, go talk to him. You know, we're not, the council can't respond to you, and this is not permitted in this forum. Just like we have rules of decorum and other things that you can't do here. It's not unreasonable. There is another avenue for the person to be heard. You're sitting right there, and you'll set up an appointment, and you can talk with them. But if we get that person who comes up and says blah, 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 and a council member, and it's not this council, I'm talking the next 5 councils down the road. This thing's not going away. And somebody says, I hear you, I heard you, Mr. Riley. I still want to talk. You gonna stop me, presiding officer? Ugh, now you just put me on the hot seat here. What do? What does the next mayor do?
Well, when that happens, that's one of the times to call a short recess, and I mean, I'm consistent about stuff. If that situation that you just described occurred, I would be exceptionally civil, diplomatic, and everything else, and ask the person, once I figured out what they were talking about, that explain to them there's a rule, and this is a rule. I come in every meeting with this stuff at my fingertips, ready to use it if I need to. If it continues, then you as the chair have the ability to have a recess, and during the recess, I would talk to you as the chair, and then I would also talk to the citizen and explain it. And I don't want to overuse this line, but reasonable people hopefully will act in a reasonable manner, and I would say that to somebody that was here intent on explaining their full story. And hopefully they would be a reasonable person.
I'm just not comfortable. I'm comfortable with the citizen being able to speak. I have no problem with that. My problem is that if I have a council member or myself wants to speak about that, it might be best practice, it might be the worst thing that you ever say, it might torpedo your city's case. Can I stop a person from speaking, or can someone stop the presiding officer from speaking? And I think the constitutional answer is you can't. I think they can do. It might be political suicide, it might be unwise, it might be frowned upon, but
Well, before it gets to that point, I would hope we would have a recess, and I would have an opportunity to talk to the chair and any council member that we needed to discuss it further. I mean, y'all are the ones that are obligated to follow that rule, not the citizen. And is that fair? I don't think it's particularly fair, but that is the rule you have now.
question is, should we change that? That's the answer. I don't know. I hear what we can do, but even if we came in the back room and said, hey, let's, not say something, let's say something. It comes down to, the rule says you can't have a discussion about it. It says you can't. It's ruled out of order. So, is that something that holds up? To me, it doesn't. If you tell me it's okay, then we move on to the next item. I'm fine with it. I don't expect a constitutional analysis tonight. If you want to research it, but I'm just saying, one side speaks, the other side speaks, or neither side speaks. We're in the same room. We're not employees. You can do this with an employee. We could certainly say to our city employees, we could say to Lynn Reeves, you can't speak, because he's an employee. We have that power as a city. But I don't think you can do it to an elected official. I don't think you can do that, Mr. Riley. You can double check it, but if you want, I'll wait. There's nothing urgent that I need an answer tonight. I just wanted to bring it up before it becomes an issue.
Well, if y'all want me to look into it further, I'm certainly receptive to doing that.
I'd rather find out sooner than later. But
I'm not sure I see the merits of pursuing further discussion.
I can't hear you.
I'm sorry. I'm not sure I see the merits of pursuing this. I mean, we deal with, in your mind, it's a constitutional issue, and again, are we trying, is there something so flagrant in front of us that we have to fix it right now, or do we just wait for it to become an issue?
it's become an issue once before, so it's, it was handled fine that night, but it's become an issue, so will it pop up again? I don't know. I saw 5, again, not talking about any lawsuits, I've seen 5 or 6 letters in the last 6 months, so will it come up again? Who knows? Yeah, maybe.
Well, I guess in my mind is, the prohibition is against the council discussing
Correct.
litigation. That doesn't mean that a citizen can't come forward and make a one-way
That's the issue.
Comment?
We have no problem. Either one talks and the other answers, or none talks. You have a limited public forum here, you're setting the rules, and you're saying, you guys can talk, you guys can't. I'm not your employee.
No,
I'm not, we could do this again, I'm not picking on Lynn, it could be Lynn, it could be Kyle, it could be Patty, we could say, you're employees. As part of your employment, you can't go out and press conferences and doing this, that, and the other thing. We could do that. But constitutionally, I don't think you can do it to an elected official and tell them they can't speak on something. Robin, you're next as soon as Glenn finishes.
Usually when a citizen comments, we don't really give playback unless there's a special circumstance, and usually, everybody agrees, yeah, sure, go ahead and answer the question, or Lynn answer the question. So if a citizen comes up here and starts yelling, spouting, whatever, then we don't respond. We can't, it's not saying you're not allowed to. It's just saying that we normally don't respond to citizen comments, or we're just following our normal protocols. And that
You
kind
respond at the end of the night during when it comes to council.
if you choose to.
But this stops it.
Well, I get that, but hopefully by the end of the night, your temper has cooled and you're not going to address it.
But we've also said why you don't address it. It's because you don't want to go down the route, the path of an admission against your own interests. So
I know what admission against interest are, but people do it all the time. So the question is it legal, constitutional? It's a yes, no. It's really, whether it's wise or not, I agree. It may not be wise. It's not wise for people to confess to the police when they get busted. They do it, okay? And then they lose.
But I don't see the merit or value of expending city budgets to have the city attorney research a constitutional issue that just doesn't mean anything to me right now. Personally, as a council member, I mean, if it were an issue, I would say yes, but I don't see tasking the city attorney to research a constitutional question that really just doesn't have any bearing on us right now.
Yeah, Dave.
Just based on what I've seen since I've lived in Bel Air Beach, I think honestly, if any council member ever wants to reply back to a citizen who is standing there, I don't think anything's ever stopped them. I just, there may be a rule that says don't do it, but if that's the case, I don't think that if it's a heated enough conversation, you're not going to, we've seen it in the past. There's just sometimes you can't stop somebody from talking. And the rule's already in place. So it's just a rule that we're not really, we try to adhere to it, but occasionally we're not going to. And that's exactly what you're talking about, is you want the freedom to be able to speak. Well, I don't think anything has stopped you. So I don't see where this is
It's not just about me, it's about
I know, I'm just saying, all of us, whenever we've had someone standing there and they said something that hit a chord with us, we've all at one time or another responded to that citizen, not thinking about what it was about, whether it was a lawsuit or anything else. Anything that they say could be used against us. If we turn on and say that we give an inappropriate response, it's a risk we take for being up here. And I agree with what Mr. Riley is saying is, yes, he's going to advise you not to speak if he detects trouble. But that's all he can do.
So we don't want to pursue this. I have two people, I heard what you said. We don't want to have any formal research done on this at this point? No? Okay. Mr. Riley, I'll go with what you suggested. If it comes up again, though, I'm going to ask you the same question I just asked you tonight. So whether you formally research it or not, we'll need an answer at that point, and that will probably need on the spot. So
That's fine. I will tell you just a final point. In the other city I represent, this comes up periodically. And the way it comes up is citizen comes forward and starts explaining something and everybody's trying to figure out what it is. And often, like I said earlier, oftentimes it's hard to figure out what it is. But as soon as I or the chair figure out what it is, then we, at some point, I make the statement that the city, if you're threatening litigation, then the city council should not respond at this juncture to the claim that you're making. And that's the statement I made, and, I know it's not easy, but the better course of action is to simply let them use their 3 minutes or whatever time they have and say whatever they want to say, and then it is, no matter how inflammatory it may be, let them sit down and move on to the next item. That is difficult to do, even for me, but I recommend that's what you do.
Fair enough. And thank you for clarifying regarding the one piece on addressing. I don't see a prohibition with that. That leaves us open for having discussions if so recommended. Okay, so we've got 2 more items. I think they're relatively quick, but sometimes I can be wrong on this stuff. I think we have maybe a half an hour left. Does anybody need a break now, or you want to push straight through? Does we need a break? Okay, so it's 8:35, we take 10 minutes? Is that 5 minutes? 5, that's quick, okay. 5 minutes, 8:40. So back on. All right, item 7, Patty, you're back, right? You got it? Okay.
Yes.
Item 7 with that, it's a follow-up regarding Ms. Hoffman's construction parking issue and promulgation of construction parking rules for contractors, which I don't know is going to be necessary. I brought it. The matter was raised to city manager's attention on January 4th, council meeting. It remained unresolved as when I wrote this. The citizen reported that there was no change after the council meeting. Now with that, I will say, I had a discussion that same day with Lynn Reeves, and he went out and visited, and so I spoke with Ms. Hoffman. Ms. Hoffman's not here tonight, correct? There's no response from the audience, so Ms. Hoffman was invited to come here tonight and speak with us. I went out to visit the site once, and when I went, the street was completely empty, so I have no firsthand information to impart here. But the issue is basically, there's construction vehicles, there's 2 houses being built by her across the street. The trucks are legally parked on the street, but yet it's making it difficult, if not impossible, for her to get out of her driveway without driving all over her lawn and stuff like that. According to her, she's asked them to move. Sometimes they move, sometimes they don't move. Code has been called. Apparently Danny was able to help out in some cases. So she was happy with that. But she's also said she wrote 2 legal letters. And I don't know if she wrote one to us as a city. I see there was an email that was placed on our desk today. So I just keep it here because it's a follow-up. I wanted her to address us. I don't know that we need rules, but the one thing I heard that was very distressing is that there was parking on both sides of the street. And I thought that was something that we agreed going all the way back to the festival, that we don't ever want to have a situation where 2 cars are parked on opposite sides of the street, because then we can't get an emergency vehicle through, and that is a problem. So I don't know the rest of this. I'm not going to take sides. She's basically registered her complaint with me via telephone calls now. So I'm bringing it back up. Maybe I'll throw it right over to Lynn Reeves for his, what's happened subsequently, because I was not a party to that conversation.
Well, Mayor and Council, Mrs. Hoffman has to understand that, and I told her that. I told her it's a 2-way street. They are leaving you a lane to get in and out of your driveway. They're building 2 houses, unfortunately, at the same time, right next door to each other. I got an email from her yesterday stating, which I have given you a copy of, they were doing the sewer tap, and there was plenty of room for a car to get out of a driveway and go on down the street. There was a Duke truck, one Duke truck parked at the very end of the street, probably, I don't know, 80 to 100 yards away from Mrs. Hoffman's house. It was on the curb, like he was turning to come back, and his truck was parked there. Had nothing to do with the construction. Yesterday, the county was out there, as I said, doing the sewer tap. They dug their hole along the curb. They put their dirt on the road, and you'll see the pictures. At the end of the day, they cleaned the street up. And they did put a dewatering system in, a well point system, and it's still running there. Unfortunately, when you have a house being constructed, and, you know, I said this at the last meeting, the contractors tried to be nice about it, but the contractor already also complained that Mrs. Hoffman comes out there, whether she's leaving or not, and tells the truck they gotta move. And, you know, the contractor's saying, she's telling my people to move when they're unloading something and they're there 10 minutes. And, you know, realistically, our code says that there's an exception that says that vehicles that are involved within the immediate area where construction or commercial work is at, but only during, they can be there, only during the construction hours. I can honestly say that Councilmember Shirley is well aware of what happens when there's construction, because there was a big house built right across the street from them, actually two of them, over a time frame. And yes, they do park, and yes, you might have to turn a little bit to get out of your driveway, but, I mean, I got the same thing on my street right now where they park trucks, and yeah, you gotta turn a little bit to get out of your driveway. But that's the nature of construction. And on the other side, if Mrs. Hoffman has, you know, some work done at her house, she's gonna impact the people across the street. So I really don't think it's an issue. It's just a person that, and, you know, again, I think it's just a person that's groveling with calling the mayor. I think she sent emails to the vice mayor, didn't she? Vice mayor? And, you know, I tried to explain to her, you don't own the other side of the street. And another thing that's going to happen, I was told by the county yesterday, they're going to dig up her right away in her front yard.
Oh, that'll be fun.
So that's how construction is to connect the water line.
May I suggest you have a
We're-
conversation with her and let her know that, because
We're-
you know whose phone's could be ringing.
No, I understand that, but really, you know, the contractors have been very good about getting their stuff out of there. She did complain to me about a toilet that somebody dropped at the dumpster. Well, it was probably one of her neighbors that dumped the toilet at the dumpster, you know, and the contractor didn't put it in the dumpster right away. But, you know, I think this is a non-issue. She just has to understand that, unfortunately, for the next 15 plus months, there can be construction there. And they aren't parking, they aren't blocking their driveway, they aren't doing any of that. What they're doing is parking across the street, on the other side of the street. It's just the situation, and I think it's a non-issue, really.
Can I ask a question? Is she house 111? Is that
Yeah.
her house? Okay. Yeah. You know, I've gone down here a couple times knowing this was coming up, and I've seen construction trucks like Lindsay all parked on one side of the street, not both sides. There was a concrete truck there today. They were pumping the block cells, and he was kind of backed in and hanging out in the road a bit, but I don't know that there's anything that you can do. It's the nature of construction. I mean, I didn't see them doing anything awful. It's never fun. It's not fun to have construction going on around your house. There's, you know, I got in issues with my neighbors, but I never called the mayor about it, you know. I dealt with it, you know, so.
And when the mayor did it, because he built his own house a few years ago, and we had two houses going at the same time, I had cranes there, I had heavy equipment, and I didn't know my neighbors, so this was my opportunity to knock on their door. I introduced myself, I told them when I might be blocking the road, when I had pile driving equipment coming in. I let them know that. I didn't have one complaint. I'm very good friends with every one of those neighbors, so, you know,
I don't know why they can't all get along, but they're not. You say it's not an issue, and I can see that maybe it's not an issue that we all have to change code or ordinances with, but it is an issue when you get a phone call every week, because, I mean, I work during the day, you know, I can't run out, and again, I walk down here, you've got a picture of an open block, that's exactly what I saw, there wasn't one person there, the block was clean, it was actually
This was
very
at
nice.
the end of the day.
Yeah,
After they had left for the day. This was yesterday at the end of the day.
I don't know what the solution is, because, I mean, now we're saying that they're gonna come and dig up a right of way, you know the phones are gonna ring. And I'm not dismissing them, I mean, if I get a call, you're gonna obviously know about it, but I have no magic power either. I certainly can't, I'm not gonna take someone's side on this. I mean, if I drive down the road and I see a truck in the middle of the street,
Different
that's a
story.
problem, and then she can call the police or whatever on that, and they should respond, but, I mean, I'm not gonna tell the truck, we didn't do this when I built my house. I mean, we were courteous to the neighbors, so, and if you're not really coming out of your driveway, then, you know, it's not an issue. I mean, if you have to get out, then yes, please move the truck. I mean,
Well, I will tell you that after she sent these letters from an attorney to the contractor, they basically stated that, would you please move your truck? They came from an attorney, I guess her attorney. And so one of the contractors came in to see us with the letter, and I said, I understand that she told me she was gonna send a letter to you. He said, I was out there for an hour, a truck pulled up, she came across the street and told him to move immediately, but she never left her house. And so I think she's getting a little overzealous with the whole situation.
Well, here's the thing, are they breaking any laws? If
No.
they are, call the police. That would be my answer to her. They're operating within our code and their rights, and, you know, we'll make sure that code enforcement goes up and down the street, you know, often to see if there's anything that's out of compliance. Otherwise, call the police if there's a real problem, if the road's completely blocked.
Jody, I think that's an excellent, with the code enforcement, she speaks, I mean, she
Danny's
and again, she's had a lot nice to say about Danny, so maybe it becomes a regular stop on his tour, and, you know, just, he has a way of working with these guys to do it, but I mean, if they're building a house directly across the street, first off, I'm not gonna, I have no power to tell people, go park here and there, but even if I did, I'm not gonna make you park all the way down the block and bring your materials 5 houses, that just doesn't, that's not efficient, that's not right, I wouldn't have wanted somebody to do that when I was building, so, I don't know, Lynn, I keep bringing it up, I don't wanna see it again, you know, is there a way we can, you know, short circuit this thing?
Well, I told her last week, and she kind of got a little upset with me, and I said, Mrs. Hoffman, you complained about your neighbor next door that was fixing their foundation. You complained about your neighbor behind you. You complained about this guy. And then yesterday when she sent this, I was like, wait a minute. They're digging a sewer tap. What if your sewer was gone? You wouldn't want them digging it across the street? So I'm at the point that I've explained to her, I said it's a two-way street. If they're totally blocking your driveway, that's a different story, but they're not. And I'm sure she's going to be upset when the county goes across the street and tells her, I'm digging up your right of way because of the water tap. So I don't think it's going to go away. We'll just have to do the best we can with her.
I'll keep fielding the calls and getting them back here. Yeah.
You know, this is the classic definition of insanity, right? She keeps bringing up the issue. We keep going back to the city manager to resolve this thing. He's done his best, and yet he's getting more direction to resolve this thing. He's done everything he can. I hate to say this, but the buck stops right there, and it may be time for you to pick up the phone and have a conversation with Ms. Hoffman, or I know you have a busy schedule, but it may be worth 30 minutes of your time to walk over there and set up a meeting with her and explain, hey, you know, just because it's not going your way doesn't mean we haven't looked into the issue. We've addressed it. We've looked at the legalities of it. We looked at the permit and coding stuff. We looked at the situation. I've been down there 3 times. I know Jody's been down there to look at the situation, and I guess the consensus of people who spend time down there and look at it is like, you know, gee whiz, it's a wide street. You're telling me you can't get out of your driveway if there's a truck parked on the other side? I'm sorry, I'm having a
To your point, I've never been called while it's happening, okay, and I've asked for photos, and these don't count, but I know what the street looks like empty. I want to see it when there's somebody breaking or infringing on somebody's.
Well, that little photo does show what happened yesterday.
That's, not
But
really-
see the dirt piles? She
Yeah.
took a picture of the dirt piles in the road.
You know, I got a car, an old car that has, manual steering, and I can pull it out of that driveway, and it's 20+ feet
And she
wide.
might need to turn her head over her shoulder instead of using her backup
Yes.
camera.
But I mean, you know, look, I'll be happy to go down, but I don't run the city. The city manager runs the city. It's his job to do it. And she doesn't have anything nice to say about you, and I got that. She doesn't agree with you. She likes Danny. She has no use, basically, for City Hall. And so she calls me thinking that I could say, go do it, and all I can do is bring it back up. My only concern is twofold. Number one, and I don't have pictures of this either, are there cars parked on both sides of the street? If I see cars on both sides of the street, I'll be calling you to come on out, because that, we have said, is a major hazard, okay? So that's a no-go. If it's opposite your driveway, you know, that stinks, but that happens. I mean, so, you know, I need to see it when it's happening. If they're by the valley curb, if that's the picture that I'm seeing here, and it's a
Yeah.
terrible shot, I can pull out of there. So you might have to go over 2 or 3 times, but you're gonna do it without having any real problem. If they're parked in the middle of the street, that's a different story, then you can't get out. I need to see it. I don't mind going down, but you can't call me a day later and say, Mayor, do something about it. I can't do anything about it anyway. Even if they're in the middle of the street, what am I gonna say? All I can say is, hey, I'm the mayor, and guess what? I can make ordinances and make the ordinance tougher, and I can take away your street parking privilege. I mean, it's a privilege. We have a no parking policy. We give this policy, and we let people park on the street, but just like we give it, we can take it away, or we can put restrictions. That's why I brought it up tonight, really, to say, do we need to do anything? The answer is, what I'm getting is, no, we don't. I would love to see this when it's happening. I don't mind going out, but, you know, I'm not gonna come out of a court meeting to go and look at a parked car. I mean, that's, we have a city manager and his staff for.
But
Maybe
I-
send code. Yeah.
I think if she calls you, you could have that conversation
Yes,
with her
I
on
will.
the phone, and then that might soften it some, I don't know.
Yeah.
She sounds difficult.
I mean, she's nice when I speak to her, but I mean, there's just certain people that have issues, and we've had success with Danny. To the extent you want to use them, use them. Maybe we'll be talking about this in February, maybe it'll go away, but if they're gonna dig up her yard for the right of way,
Keep going until
you
the
might as
house
well,
is
Patty,
done.
put this on the agenda for February.
Just what you said, Councilmember, it will be going on till the house is done.
Exactly.
I've got the experience from it with the house right next door. Till they got the foundations refilled, it was almost a daily phone call.
You know, we have with the construction at the end of our block, I mean, there's trucks going up and down. You know, it's all for the good. We're gonna get better stormwater treatment by the end of it, so we all bite the bullet and we deal with it. Because, you know, some people don't believe that it's not a through street, so they pull their big truck down and they have to back up, 500 feet, and you hear beep, beep, all that. So, but you know, it's all for the good. But we're different neighbors. We're not like that. You gotta live with these people when they move in, so that would be the advice I would give.
It just goes back
Okay.
to being a good neighbor.
Was that?
It just goes back to being a good neighbor. I know when Glenn was redoing his roof, there was a car parked right there, and I was backing out, and the guy was kind enough to direct me, and I didn't care, because you know what, a few months or a year before, I did my roof, which I'm sure inconvenienced Glenn, but he never said anything, so it's just, can't we all just get along? It's just need to be good
Well,
neighbors.
It's just unfortunate, like I said, that there were 2 lots there, and they both started construction at the same time.
But it's workable. Okay, we're not gonna do anything on it, just brought it up. So let's end on a positive note here. Number 8, discussion of ongoing lack of enforcement of mandatory COVID mask policy at City Hall, in particular lack of enforcement of mandatory mask requirement during city council meetings and work sessions, brought by me. Explanation, the mandatory COVID-19 mask policy is routinely violated by certain citizens and certain council members during the council meetings and work session. There's a lack of enforcement. I'm not here to discuss individuals. I'm not here to discuss particular instances. It's the way, it goes back to our enforcement of laws, I'm looking at Fred Riley, and the equal enforcement of the laws. The rule, the ordinance, we're under a state of emergency, we've given the power to the city manager, and the county has said masks required inside. We have that, we've adopted that policy, which is consistent with best practices, and it's not enforced, okay? People don't have a mask on, and I had a particular instance, again, not gonna say the people, but I actually pointed it out to the city manager. There was some individuals in the audience. City manager went over, asked them to put the mask on, put it on. 5 minutes later, took it off. He went over again, put it on, took it off. I'm like, forget it. I'm not gonna stop the meeting every 5 minutes and be the mask police. I don't think that's practical. But the sign says mandatory, our website says mandatory, and people wear it or not wear it. I don't want to get into a discussion of the efficacy of these things. It's the rule and the law. So my point is simple. Either we do away with the policy and make it optional. If the city attorney agrees that that's a smart thing to do, then you can wear it if you want and you don't have to wear it. But if it's mandatory, mandatory says it's mandatory. And then we need enforcement. I don't think it's my job to stop the meeting every 2 minutes and tell people to put a mask on. I don't think it should be the city manager, although he's the responsible party for the building. We need him to pay attention to the meeting, not be the mask police. So to me, if we decide that we want to enforce this, the obvious thing to do, I don't see a sheriff here tonight, but when we have our sheriff who does security here, he simply walks up and down, and if someone doesn't have a mask, he just motions to him to put the mask on. It's real simple. He can do that. It's not taking him away from his duties that night to enforce it. If we don't want to enforce it, then make the sign say masks optional, masks suggested, masks hoped for, whatever. It's that simple, okay? I'm gonna ask that we just keep the discussion on how we're gonna enforce this, not whether these are good, bad, what Dr. Fauci said. It doesn't, right now, this is what the law is and what our house rule is. With that, I'll throw it over to the city manager if he has comments, and then we'll get it back to council. And city attorney also, if you like.
Yeah, Mayor and Council, the sheriff's not going to enforce it either. The governor put out an executive order. Yes, this is a county mask ordinance, and the city adopted it. The county has some fines and penalties for it, but the governor, through an executive order, said that no county can do any fine or penalty to anyone. And that was an executive order,
20-244.
okay. So, yes, it's a recommendation, and the county's mask ordinance is mandatory, but it cannot, there's no penalty or enforcement you can really do. You can ask people, and hopefully they put them on. If they don't, I can't go arrest a council member.
I'm not saying arrest.
Or
I'm not saying
I
arrest.
can't do anything to them.
Can you ask him to leave?
I could ask you to put your mask on, but that's about as far as it goes. There's
Can you
no
ask them to
penalty.
leave?
Well, the council, that would be, in my mind, that would be the presiding officer asking them to leave, not the city manager. But the public, I guess we could ask them to leave, but realistically, there's no penalty is the issue. And the governor said that. No county can force a penalty. And there's stipulations that they don't have to wear the mask. You know, if they've got, if it causes a breathing problem, you don't have to wear that mask. If it,
Provided by a medical provider.
No,
can't
you
just say-
cannot ask the question, and they do not have to carry documentation. It's specifically in the ordinance, the county ordinance. Do you want the section and verse where it says that? If a person says he has a breathing difficulty or disability, that's the end of the conversation. You cannot ask him what it is, and he does not have to carry any documentation or proof. A face shield is allowed instead of a face covering, right? And there are some provisions that talk about in locations of over 10 people, if you cannot maintain social distancing, then you do a mask. But again, it comes back to the nebulous.
But
wording in the ordinance.
scientifically, it's not mask or
We're not
social
discussing that.
distancing. I'm not talking about the efficacy of a mask, I'm talking about it's not one or the other. All is recommended. It's like saying wear a mask but don't wash your hands. I mean, it's all of it.
Well, I think
If you
you
care about people, then you should be able to wear a mask, and I don't see what the problem with.
I just want to get past the should, this is like we were talking about before on the other issue. It's best practices, it's certainly smart not to comment on litigation, but the question I had was, can you stop a person? It's best practices to wear one, you should do it, and we can go on for an hour as to what the benefits are, and other people may say, no, there's no benefit at all. Question is it says mandatory, you've given me an answer, I want to hear from the city attorney. If there's nothing we can do about it, then although all I'm going to say is if there's nothing we can do about it, then let's just make sure we're square as a city that there's nothing we can do about it. So when Mrs. Jones walks in the middle of the afternoon, coughing up a lung, and says, I'm not putting my mask on, I got to give me pimples, so I'm not wearing that, you're going to have to say, sure, come to the window and get your parking pass. So I just want to make sure, because I don't want to hear that we enforce it there, but we don't enforce it here. We are socially distanced over here, okay? You've spread this room out really nicely, and as long as we don't get an overflow crowd, I mean, it doesn't really matter. I'm 6 feet away from Glenn right now. So, but the question is what should we do? And if the answer is we can't really do anything, forget it. I'm not asking for people to get arrested or fined. I'm saying all you would do is say, put your mask on, or else step outside. When you put it on, come back. If you can't do that, then we're done talking. That's it. We're finished.
Well, we can act, oh, excuse me.
I can ask them to put their mask on, but I can't make them do it.
Can't make anyone do
And I don't
it.
want you being interrupted in the meeting. You need to focus on the meeting. I mean, we did that, we tried that, and twice in 15 minutes. I mean, you need, we need you at this meeting, all of you, not where you're scanning the room for violators. It's, I mean, I don't know. Marv?
The only thing I can say is when the public is here, we need to be an example. Wear a mask when they're here. What they do is another thing, but what we do, we're held to a higher standard. So we need to follow the rules.
What does me wearing a mask have to do with anything that the public's doing? It has nothing to do with anything.
Just
And if it's a
eliminate-
requirement, and I want to hear what our attorney has to say about this, because if it's a requirement, you may as well just kick me out of here now, because I'm not going to sit at this podium for 4 hours with a mask on. I don't care what you guys do.
It's not easy. I mean, I know we're all doing it, but there's some people that are not capable of doing it. There's some people that it's causing breathing problems for. I'm not, I really don't know what's in the science, and honestly, I don't really care. What I care about is who am I to judge what's best for somebody else? And that's where I go with this, is that, yep, you got some people that are die hard, wear the mask. I don't care if it kills you, you're gonna wear that mask. And then you've got other people that are like, I understand, it's not working out for you, and I'm okay with that. I don't know how to address it, but if there's no way to enforce it, and the governor has said, there's nothing we can do. You can't enforce the fines, and the police aren't doing anything. What do we have to stand on?
Fred, I think we need to hear from you, because really, the discussion, if we can't enforce this, we're done. We're finished with the discussion. There's nothing more to be talked about. If we can enforce it, then it goes back to my question, how do we enforce it? Okay? No one's advocating, I'll say it again, because I don't want to see this incorrectly quoted in the press or anyplace else. No one's advocating that people be drop tackled and arrested and dragged off. That didn't happen then, it didn't happen anytime. It's simply, please put your mask on. Now, the U.S. House of Representatives, in their little impeachment episode last week, all were wearing them. So that's the U.S. House of Representatives. I said, wow, Bel Air Beach Council and citizens, maybe, there's a lesson here. What say you, Mr. Riley?
Okay, this is another topic I discussed with Lynn. There are 4 executive orders that are relevant. I'm going to read from the one that's the most relevant, but this executive order has been extended through the end of February. This is Executive Order 20-244, Section 4, Suspension of COVID-19 related individual fines and penalties. This order, consistent with Executive Order 20-92, suspends the collection of fines and penalties associated with COVID-19 enforced upon individuals. So, the answer to the question, as far as I'm concerned, is you, by virtue of this executive order, you have no ability to levy a fine or a penalty upon an individual for not complying with a COVID-19 requirement.
So back to my question, can you ask, we never asked to levy a fine, never asked to levy a penalty, never asked for an arrest. I was at a restaurant last week, one of the rare times of Lent, and I had to use a portion of the restaurant by the restroom. The guy said, when you're eating, you don't have your mask on, but he's like, gotta put your mask on. Okay. I don't know what would have happened if I would have said, I'm not gonna put it on. Maybe he would have said, you can't use that area. What can you do? We can't do fines, penalties, and electrocutions and all that kind of stuff, so what can you do? Can you ask them to put it on? Sure. If they say no, can you ask them to leave? This is a private building. I mean, it's public, but it's a private building, so can you say, step outside until you decide to put it on?
That's the question you're asking?
Yeah.
If penalties encompasses putting somebody out of a meeting, then you can't do that.
Okay.
I think that would be a penalty. That's how it would be construed. Or that, if they looked into it, that's what they would claim as their defense.
That's all I need to know. I'm never going to put anybody out of a meeting if we don't have good grounds to do it, and legally, constitutional grounds. This is a public forum, so.
This is one of these times, I'm telling you what the law is, and the law doesn't give you the ability to enforce it. You asked the question earlier, what do I recommend you do? I recommend you claim, or not claim, that you continue with being consistent with the county position that it is mandatory. And keep the signs that say it's mandatory. You just don't have the ability to really do much about it.
Okay.
I wish I had a better answer for you.
No, that answers my question. I'm not sure if anybody else on council has anything else.
It goes back to,
I'm sorry, that Executive Order 244, the rest of that is, while they can't enforce it against individuals, they can enforce it against businesses. So that's why you can't confuse, I'm in a restaurant, a guy asked me to put on a mask. Well, yeah,
He can ask you to
he's
leave.
the guy that gets penalized and fined, and he can refuse you business. That's where the difference is.
Okay. We have general business. Does anybody have anything that wasn't on? Oh, I'm sorry. Was there anything else? Anything from the public? To finish with that topic. I've done it in half an hour. Now, general business. Anybody have anything that wasn't on the agenda?
I had something, but I don't want to talk about
RFB, okay?
I brought up 40 items 3 years ago that was put together by a few people. One died, one moved, another one retired. Originally there was 30, and then when we got together before we got elected, there was 40 items. All of those 40 items over the last 3 years have been addressed. And I would say out of those 40 items, maybe there's 3 that are still pending. I'd like to say this council really has worked over the last number of years to get stuff done. And I know I won't be a member of this group for too much longer, but I'd like to say thank you for all the hard work. A lot of long nights, a lot of discussions, but thank you.
Well, we should be the one thanking you for 2 terms and all the effort that you put in and being on this group that kind of started getting this city back on the right path. So thank you. And
It's not only me, it took a lot of people to do it, and it took this group to get this far. It took the city manager, the attorney, and it's been fantastic. So thank you all.
thanks, Mark. Anybody else on council before I go to city manager?
I just had a question for the city manager. Okay, I know that they've pulled up all of our asphalt. I'm sorry, they pulled up all the asphalt on 22nd and all the other streets. But I've also noticed that there's spray paint where they're marking things. Is something else happening that,
Well, the curb company may be marking something, but the other, are you talking about across the bridge or in?
well, just to be honest with you, it's my house and several of my neighbors, they're marking something. I'm just trying to figure out what it is.
I'll find out for sure what it is.
Okay.
I thought maybe it was the place where I was gonna dump the millings, but maybe that's not it.
I just registered.
Well, I thought you might want to use them on your roof.
Exactly. Hey, that thing's done. It looks good.
Okay,
Go ahead.
just quickly, I gave you a little supplemental sheet, estimate of things. I didn't give you specific dates, I just gave you timeframes. That'll be something that we'll discuss in the meeting. I also gave you, so you can plan ahead for the upcoming budget season. We're gonna start a little bit earlier this year with the staff trying to get the budget put together, so instead of doing a budget work session like every other week, we'll try to work it in, one in June, one in July, and then we'll hopefully be past that. The supplemental patrol we did over New Year's Eve. New Year's Eve day, there were 2 deputies out there. Because the traffic was so heavy, there was no, or New Year's Eve, there was no traffic citations given because the traffic was bumper to bumper. Then on the 1st, they used the DUI traffic enforcement people. So, I mean, these were people that are well aware of the enforcement. They conducted speeding and stop violations. They issued 3 traffic warnings, 2 citations, and 1 criminal citation during those. So, first day, nothing because the traffic was so crowded. And the last thing, we've already talked about the undergrounding for Gulf Boulevard and Penny 4 money that's going to come to us to do that. I just wanted to make you aware that I'll be sending a letter to the Big C, getting authorization to start preparing those funds for expenditure. It's just a formality. We did it with the previous Penny, and we've already, I've already submitted the invoice for the, I think it was $10,200 for the binding estimate from you to get reimbursed by the county, but I just wanted to make you aware of that. I mean, and if you have any questions, that's it for me.
Then I have 2 quick things for you. One is the flags in my front yard are going on 3 months old. Can I take them out because my lawnmower is like eating them alive?
Yeah, I don't think,
Finish it,
they're probably gonna, they'll have to regenerate them at some point in time.
And secondly, Marv is leaving us here, and there's a couple people up for re-election. For people who are coming off council, we've traditionally given them a nice little gift, it's like crystal paperweight and stuff like that. But I've seen it, and it's nice. But I mean, I think for the amount of services that a person puts in, we could probably do something a little bit nicer as a city to show our appreciation. No, we don't have to give them a new car, but I think we should give somebody a Rolex watch. And then we'll deal with the ethics issues. But, can we maybe look into this? The paperweight ain't doing it for me.
Well, I have a clock from a long time.
I've seen that clock. The clocks are nice. Marv was thinking about maybe a swimming pool. No, I mean, something that, I don't know. A little bit.
We can look further into that. That's not a problem.
Okay. That's all I had. Thank you, folks. The next, okay, I just want to quick, the next meeting is February 1st after tonight?
Yes.
Okay. Joe.
Okay, just quickly, Hibiscus, what's happening on Hibiscus? Is there a sewer issue or something? Manhole recovery, something is out there, or?
I know the county was down there doing some stuff on Hibiscus. I don't know exactly.
Got the
what
road closed, that's.
I'll find that out for you.
Okay, all right, and then Marv, what are the 3 items that haven't been addressed on the list? Just curious.
Curious,
Rolex, his swimming pool. And,
Disapproved dock permit?
Let's see. I think we talked about, variance committee needs to, whenever they meet and decide something, we never know as a council what the results are. Well,
Sorry, I didn't mean to put you on the spot.
No, you know, but I mean, you just mentioned it. That's one that we could, I mean, like, to get the results of the variance committee, it's just a matter of getting some minutes from that, so. We can knock that out in 5 minutes.
We never go as a council to discuss whether it was, we didn't like the decision.
Right. Or it's something that we want to change the ordinance on, if, you know, so.
Well,
Can we, I mean, is that something, we can solve that with
We
our
don't have
calendar?
those every time because, I mean, even though they don't come up that often, a variance is a big deal around here, so.
Well, boards and committee reports have kind of fallen by the wayside, maybe we need to put a little more emphasis on those.
I think
Hey, you do a variance, we'd like to hear it.
If you, I agree, and that should be part of the quarterly report to us, because, you know, let's say you're giving the same variance. We heard a gentleman come in talking about, can we have a sky top sunset lounge? Well, you know, there's a few that were used to be in the same, well, if you're gonna put a variance, then we need to know about that. Number one, we may want to change the ordinances of what we want to do. That can go in your quarterly report. I mean, that's something that we just have to let them know. I don't think we even need anything more than this, right?
And then the other thing that was on here, before this, I mean, this is way before we got on council, we were talking about if there was any grants in the future that were paid to the city for any undergrounding, since we paid for that ourselves and get part of that money. But we never put a resolution together to make sure that if the city or the state grants any money for hardening the whole infrastructure, hey, we paid for this already. And we never discussed the fact that if Duke Energy is going to raise our electric bills for doing, hardening the underground or doing the underground, what we've done, why should we be charged with everybody else if we need a little bit of a reduction? You would think, you know, I doubt we'd ever do it, but
Especially if somebody actually offered to pay for neighborhoods. I know that's not gonna happen, but let's just say a deep discount, but we paid full price.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
so, I mean, that's basically it, you know, that those are the two bigger ones. But otherwise, it just, Doc Ward was always squawking about that pond across the street. You want it cleaned and put the fountains back in. That was the other item, but we discussed that a few times, and that'll never happen.
Well, that's the county, that pond is the county's, is it not? So
Correct.
we're limited again, just like with the speeding thing, we could do a resolution if we agree on the council, but now all we could do is send it to our council in, you know, the county, and see if we get any traction with that.
We are gonna try with the 12th Street design, we're gonna talk to the county about, instead of we're gonna talk to them about maybe putting an outfall from the stormwater into that pond and see if they'll let us do it. We are gonna talk to them about that, so that could benefit us in another way, so.
And to his point though, on the first item, can we make, I mean, I think
That's not a
we're all
problem.
nodding heads here. I mean, let's get back with these quarterly reports, and for the Board of Adjustment, their report is simply any granting of an easements. We don't have to know about all the ones that get shot down, and there's not that many anyway. These only happen once in a while, but if they're granted, just a quick paragraph about what the issue was and, you know, why it was granted. That's all we really need.
I think the last easement was Dave and, was it Fred?
That was Ilya and
Fred,
Sarah.
Ilya.
Siraki and I. They came after
That was the last variance in the whole city?
Other than the gentleman that wanted us to let him move his house into the setback.
And he was shot down.
Yeah.
He
No,
was
we don't
shot
need to know
down,
those.
and we're taking him to a code hearing on Friday because he's passed his 24 months. So, he needs to do something with that house.
Well, I guess we didn't miss much then.
He still built a pretty big house.
Well, you do get the park thing, and we
Right.
will continue to do that quarterly, and the planning board is already started working on the code, they've had 2 meetings, and they'll give you a report also.
I mean, it could just be, I think we should have it, and I think it also, now we've got 38 done out of the 40, so, you know, I mean.
Yeah, that's not a
I
problem.
mean, this is not, you know, a complete list. Lynn's got the rest of them. I mean, we probably could remember the rest of the time. But it's an amazing how this stuff all got done over this period of time. It's really, and actually, it's the last 2 years that all is really done.
Can you forward that list to everybody?
Yeah, I can make a copy of it.
I'd like to look
Just
at
brought
it.
it up, sure.
Thanks, appreciate it.
Thank you. And I'm glad everybody, I mean, we have done a lot, and, you know, my 2 years and with the people before me, we've got, you know, this city's never been running better, so I hope everybody recognizes that. You have anything else, folks? Well, thank you. We got through this in 3.5 hours. The other thing I wanted to just throw out, just for thought, we're not going to discuss it, but just think about it. We did a work session following a council meeting. We put it all in one. Sometimes that's not possible because we have too many items on a council session. But there's nothing that says we can't do 2 meetings in one night. I don't want to go to 1 in the morning, but maybe if we have a light session sometime, and we don't have that much on work session, we might be able to follow it up and do 1. It sets, you know, stops everybody from coming in twice and minimizes the exposure with everything else, COVID and Zoom and all of that. But it worked that night because we had a lighter agenda. We didn't have a lot on both, but if, you know, like tonight was 3.5 hours, it wouldn't work. But it's just something to think about. If you see a light agenda, maybe we can put it on one night. We don't have to meet twice.
You have a light agenda on the next meeting.
I thought this was a light agenda.
This one was.
Until
3.5 hours.
Oh, could I
No,
could I make a recommendation? The recommendation would be to swap the cart and the horse, because if you do the work session before the council meeting, A, you're time limiting the work session, and B, you're discussing issues that you can take action on immediately during the council session.
Well, the only problem with that is we do work. And so if our regular council meeting is 6 PM, you're not going to get much done in a work session.
Okay. No, granted, I
The other thing too is
understand.
you're setting a dead time at that, because I mean, it has to end at 6, because by rule, we have to start at 6. So, but I mean, if we've got a light one and we want to throw a couple work session, we could even split the work sessions. It just may save us a return trip.
And that's a possibility. You started early,
Yep.
and if the business is done, you go home. Or if you think you need to reconvene for another hour after the work council meeting.
Especially if you're buying pizza.
Right, but that's the thing, we cover what we can, because we can cut a work session off, it's not a formal, I think we can cut a work session off if we can't get to it. We could say we're gonna go till 10 o'clock and that's it, so I just throw the thought out, it worked that night, and we got 2 for the price of 1, and it gives you a nice extended time for people who might be, wanting to take a trip, it's like, okay, you've got 30 days, see you in another month, We don't usually have too many special meetings, and hopefully we won't have the need for them, so. But anyway, just think about it, folks, if you want to do it, but I mean, Lynn, I guess you're going to have to let us know if you can combine them. Now, this one, we had a bunch of follow-up issues that probably aren't going to be researched in 10 days, but maybe we deal with what we've got and get the rest of it later. I don't know. I'm just throwing it out there. Think about it. So.
I know we have a light meeting at the next.
Good. You still haven't got in my good graces after keeping us till 1 o'clock that night, so. Anybody want a motion to adjourn here? Second? Good? Everybody in favor? Aye. Good night, everyone. Thank you.